Good morning. We will call to order the April 1st, 2014 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, and I'd like to wish everyone Happy Fool's Day, or April Fool's Day. Happy April Fool's Day.
Thanks for reminding me about it.
Yeah, be careful here this morning.
Exactly.
First up will be the invocation by Stan Bowling, the Community Development Director, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Bob Slaughter. Would everyone please rise? Stan, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Let's pray. Lord God, this morning we admit that we do not control you. In vain do we try to use you for our own purposes. We do not contain you. We don't even define you. You define you, and you define us. And we are thankful and grateful for that. We are grateful that you have made us with the capacity to know you, that you have revealed yourself in the Word, and we're reminded this morning of what you say in the Word, that you have shown us what is good, you've shown us what you require, that we are to act justly, we are to love mercy, and we are to walk humbly with our God. And we thank you for that. We ask that you would enable us and remind us to do those things this morning. And we ask that that would inform what's done today, the business that's before the board. And we thank you for that. In your name, amen.
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 Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Under additions or deletions to the agenda, I would like to add one item regarding travel to Tallahassee for the county administrator and the county attorney for the balance of the legislative session. And then Commissioner Slaughter, you have one of your matters might be appropriate to combine with the community development report. Would that be okay for you to move your item up to?
not only okay, I think that'd be perfectly appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move 14D2 to coincide with item 12A1.
Move staff recommendation.
And I'll second it, but just to clarification, this isn't proving anything. This is just to add that item that you're talking about to the agenda, correct? We're adopting the agenda, not to approve.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's not to.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Second.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving to proclamations and presentations. First is a presentation of Breathe Journey Project by representatives of Girl Scout Cadet Troops 50003 and 50043. And good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Presti. And I'm Stephanie Giordano. And we represent Girl Scout Troops 50003 and 50043. We have been working on a journey, which is like a badge, but takes almost a year to complete. The purpose of the journey is to learn about the air, including things that pollute it and ways that we can make a difference by cleaning up the air. This journey is called Breathe. Our troops got together to investigate the air. We investigated sounds, smells, if the air looked clean, and how it feels. As part of this journey, we decided to look at our community and find air problems that we could help correct.
We investigated the air to find out what kinds of things were polluting it. We spent some time observing the air, making a list of things that we thought needed to be fixed to make the air less polluted. Some things that caught our attention the most were sounds and smells such as car exhaust, gas fumes, leaf blowers, and cigarette smoke. We observed that there are always people smoking outside the entrances. We went online to research the effects of smoking, including secondhand smoke. After talking about all these things, we decided to try to make the mall entirely smoke-free.
We decided to go to the mall and ask people to sign petitions to make the mall completely smoke-free. The reason we are coming to you is because there are signs that say no smoking within 150 feet of the building. However, There are ashtrays outside each entrance, and people ignore the signs and stand around smoking at the entrances. We would like you to help us by being a part of our air care team by enforcing that rule.
Almost everyone we spoke to agreed that smoking at the mall entrances is a problem, even smokers. One of the things we spoke to said that even though she only smokes 2 cigarettes a day, it wouldn't be worth her time to walk all the way out into the parking lot just to have a cigarette. She said it might even help her quit completely if it wasn't so easy for her to smoke at work. We feel that this simple act can save a lot of people from breathing in secondhand smoke. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Well, good, ladies. Thank you. Tell us a little bit just about yourselves and your troops, just so we know.
Well, we're with a sister troop, and we work with the other troop, 50043, and we work together on this breathe journey, and we do the breathe journey, like we have a meeting once every month.
Okay, good. Now, it's my understanding then that the mall does have then no smoking allowed inside the mall, but that the mall itself isn't enforcing the 150-foot buffer. Is that correct? Okay. Have you approached the mall management about enforcing that, or?
We called and haven't received a return call.
Okay. Okay. One of the things, unfortunately, with smoking, the state of Florida regulates that. The county, we're allowed to regulate things like such as the sale of tobacco products, and we do have ordinances that say that tobacco products cannot be sold to people under the age of 18, that they can't be on the front counter, they have to be placed behind the counter, so kids don't have easy access to them. And that's kind of where our authority ends. But what I would be glad to do, and with the board's permission, is I could write a letter to the mall management just asking them to look at their current rules, the 150-foot buffer, and encourage them to enforce their 150-foot buffer rule that they have in place. And I don't know, Commissioners, does that seem reasonable?
I think that's absolutely reasonable, Mr. Chairman. As a matter of fact, a lot of great things come out of young individuals like yourself. It's a very noble project, and I understand you did not get a response, but perhaps maybe they would respond to your interest here today before us, even though that we do not have the legislative authority or capacity to address the issue as you wanted to, and as you encourage us to attend meetings. We'd like to help you, and I think it's most appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I'll rephrase, I'll have Dylan help me write it, but just kind of more just ask them and encourage them to enforce their existing rule and such. Commissioner Zork?
Yes, and I'd like to thank you both for your effort. And when my kids and I, we go to the school night at Chick-fil-A, they all practice holding their breath from the curb to walk through the smoking gauntlet into the door. So I'm very familiar with that and sensitive with it, since my youngest has bad reactions to smoke with some respiratory problems that he has. So if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chairman, once you have the letter drafted, I have met with the mall representatives on issues relating to the City of Vero Beach Power, since they're a very large outside customer, and their concerns with that, and be happy to maybe deliver the chairman's letter with you. Maybe we can just have a little informal meeting with the lady that's the representative for the mall out there and present the letter and what you guys have been working on, and see if she can figure out a way. They have security on the property, so it's not that they don't have people there that could help enforce it. So maybe we can take your letter and schedule a meeting with them and see where we can get it to go from there.
Okay.
And I also hope that you feel that the letter is a good resource and a tool, but I want you to know how impactful it will be that you're there in your uniform, and I believe that you might have more power yielding than the document that we provide.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you girls or your mom there or whoever could just make sure that Commissioner Zork then has a contact number, so that when the letter's done, he can get a hold of you to arrange that. If you wouldn't mind just making sure we have that, okay? All right. Ladies, thank you very much for your presentation. Well done.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
They have petitions. They'd like to give you the copies of their petition.
Oh, absolutely. Come on up. Yeah. Oh, thank you. You want the Commissioner Slaughter? Oh, that's even like a spreadsheet. Commissioner Slaughter's going to be really excited about that.
Thank you very much. He's already happy.
Thank you.
Is it your mom or her mom?
Thank you so much.
Does she want to get a picture of you guys standing in the front? Okay.
Mom, did you want to
You
get
want to take a quick picture with the girls in the front?
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Girl,
guys.
this way.
They need
Right here.
Just stand right here and face Mom there. There we go. And everybody hold their breath.
Oh, so here's a card.
You
can come back and take. Usually we have to wait with the picture.
Yeah. You're hired, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next is a presentation of a proclamation observing April 2014 as Aviation Appreciation Month. This will be presented by Commissioner Zork. And is Lisa Giesert here? Oh, good morning. Welcome. Come on up. Commissioner Zork.
Great. Good morning. Or just come right up to the podium right there.
Right there.
There you go. Good morning. This is a proclamation observing April 2014 as Aviation Appreciation Month. Whereas aviation plays a critical role in the lives of our citizens as well as in the operation of our businesses and agriculture, and whereas the state of Florida has significant interest in the continued vitality of aviation, aircraft, and aerospace manufacturing, commercial, service, and community airports, and aviation education, and whereas there are 19 commercial service and 110 general aviation community airports, and whereas more than 8.5% of Florida's gross state product result from businesses dependent upon aviation, and whereas Florida commercial airports accommodate more than 143.5 million passengers annually, ranking Florida second in the nation, and whereas international airports in Florida accommodate more than 28 million international passengers annually, which is 19.5% of the total international passengers in the nation. And whereas more than half, 52.7% of Florida's visitors arrive each year by air. And whereas Florida's general aviation community airports accommodate more than 9 million visitors and business travelers annually. And whereas air cargo operations account for more than $6.6 billion in annual economic activity to Florida, which represents 8% of the nation's air cargo. And whereas, in total, aviation represents more than $97 billion in annual economic activity, and whereas numerous leading aviation companies have headquarters or major presence in Florida. And whereas organizations like Florida Airports Council, Florida Aviation Business Association, Florida Aviation Aerospace Alliance, the Alliance for Aviation Across America, National Business Aviation Association, National Association of State Aviation Officials, Aviation Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, and the National Air Transportation Association recognize and promote the interest and the importance of aviation in Florida throughout the world. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that the Board does hereby proclaim the month of April 2014 as Aviation Appreciation Month, adopted this first day of April 2014, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I represent Piper Aircraft, one of the manufacturers located at the airport. I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the team at Piper and the 840 employees that work there, as well as the other local businesses at the airport.
Great, thank you. We have a proclamation for you if you'd like to come up.
840. Yeah, I heard that. I heard that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
840. 814. Good. Yeah. Yeah.
They snuck that in there.
And that's after a bunch of the Melbourne for too.
Thank you.
840. That's a big payroll.
Next is a presentation of a proclamation in recognition of Mayor's Day of Recognition for National Service. I will be presenting that, and is Jenna Stinnett here? Good morning, welcome, come on up. Good morning. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation, and if you have a couple words or want to introduce the rest of your team, we'll be glad to do that, okay?
Okay.
It's a proclamation of the Mayor's Day of Recognition for National Service. Whereas, service to others is a hallmark of the American character and central to how we meet our challenges, and whereas the nation's mayors are increasingly turning to national service and volunteerism as a cost-effective strategy to meet city needs, and whereas AmeriCorps and Senior Corps address the most pressing challenges facing our cities and nation, from educating students for the jobs of the 21st century and supporting veterans and military families, to preserving the environment and helping communities recover from natural disasters. And whereas national service expands economic opportunity by creating more sustainable, resilient communities and providing education, career skills, and leadership abilities for those who serve. And whereas national service participants serve in more than 70,000 locations across the country, bolstering the civic, neighborhood, and faith-based organizations that are so vital to our economic and social well-being. And whereas national service participants increase the impact of the organizations they serve with, both through their direct service and by recruiting and managing millions of additional volunteers. And whereas national service represents a unique public-private partnership that invests in community solutions and leverages non-federal resources to strengthen community impact and increase the return on taxpayer dollars. And whereas AmeriCorps members and Senior Corps volunteers demonstrate commitment, dedication, and patriotism by making an intensive commitment to service, a commitment that remains with them in their future endeavors. And whereas the Corporation for National and Community Service shares a priority with mayors nationwide to engage citizens, improve lives, and strengthen communities, and is joining with mayors across the country to support the Mayor's Day of Recognition for National Service on April 1st, 2014. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board does hereby proclaim April 1st, 2014 as National Service Recognition Day and encourage residents to recognize the positive impact of national service in our city, to thank those who serve, and to find ways to give back to their communities. Adopted this first day of April 2014, signed by all 5 county commissioners, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm Jenna Stinnett. I'm the program director for AmeriCorps here in Indian River County. Barbara Smith is our program assistant, and we have 2 AmeriCorps members, Victoria Lopez and Jane Robinson, who serve at Vero Beach Elementary. And our program is a partnership with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Indian River in St. Lucie and Okeechobee County. And we are funded by Volunteer Florida. And what we do is we provide reading tutors for elementary school students and pre-K students on the Treasure Coast. And rather than share a lot of statistics about what we do, I have one really brief story about a student we've worked with this year that really shows what it is we do. We had a 4th grade student who started with us this year, didn't know any of his letters, couldn't write his name, nothing. I spoke with his teacher about 2 weeks ago. He's been working with us since September, and she says he's only about a month behind his peers, and that by the end of the year he'll be right on grade level, if not surpassing it. So it's just a tremendous work that our members do. We have 45 members. We serve almost 500 children. So thank you so much for recognizing this day, recognizing what they do every day. We love being a part of this county and this community, so thank you very much.
Good, and thank you for the service you all provide. Thank you very much.
Super.
Come on up.
Somebody's got to do it.
Thank you very much for your volunteering.
Take the way.
Thank you for your service. Thanks for your
We'll
service.
see you next year.
Yeah, so we take a picture?
Right there.
What's higher?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is a presentation of a proclamation in recognition of Guardian Ad Litem Month in Indian River County. This is presented by Commissioner Davis. And is Vern Melvin here or
Pollock.
James Pollock? Seeing none?
I'll go ahead and read it, Mr.
Go ahead and
Chairman,
just
if
read
that's
it,
okay,
Commissioner.
and
Thank you.
see to it they get it. This is a proclamation of Guardian Ad Litem Month in Indian River County. Whereas Indian River prides itself in giving back to the community, contributing to the quality of life among our citizens. And whereas April has been designated National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And whereas April 6th through April 12th, 2014 has been designated as National Volunteer Appreciation Week. And whereas the Guardian Ad Litem program is a partnership of volunteers and staff who advocate for the best interest of abused, abandoned, and neglected children within our community. And whereas there are approximately 200 children in Indian River County involved in the court system through no fault of their own. And whereas there are approximately 50 abused, abandoned, or neglected children in Indian River County currently waiting for volunteer Guardian Ad Litems to be their voice. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that the Board hereby recognizes the month of April 2014 as Guardian Ad Litem Month in Indian River County and urge all residents of Indian River County to give of their time to make a difference in the lives of our most vulnerable children by volunteering with the Guardian Ad Litem program. Adopted this first day of April 2014, signed by all 5 county commissioners. And even though they're not here, Mr. Chairman, it's a wonderful resource to have this. It's a sad situation when we need to have this, but for all those that may be watching that are volunteers through this program, thank you very much and keep up the good work.
Okay. Thank you. And if they show you a little bit later this morning, we'll be glad to recognize them and bring them up. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Next is a presentation of a proclamation designating April 6th through April 12th, 2014 as Crime Victims' Rights Week in Indian River County. This is to be presented by Commissioner Slaughter and received by Shirley Rosemond and Paul Zono. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning.
Commissioner Slaughter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the third member of your group is certainly welcome to stand up at the podium. She doesn't. Okay. Thank you for coming this morning, and I'm very happy to read this proclamation designating April 6th through April 12th, 2014 as Crime Victims' Rights Week in Indian River County. Whereas victims of crime across America need and deserve support and assistance to help them cope with the consequences of crime, and whereas National Crime Victims' Rights Week offers us all the opportunity to promote strength and unity in helping victims and survivors of crime through a wide range of supportive services offered by over 10,000 community and justice system-based programs and the more than 32,000 federal and state statutes that define and protect their rights. And whereas, by being united against crime and for victims' rights and services, we gain strength as individuals, as communities, and as a nation as a whole, and offer strength to victims who seek to recover in the aftermath of crime. And whereas, America has joined together annually, each April since 1981, to recognize the needs and rights of crime victims and survivors during National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that April 6th through April 12th, 2014, be designated as Crime Victims' Rights Week in Indian River County, and the Board honors crime victims and those who serve them during this week and throughout the year. Adopted this first day of April 2014 and signed by all 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners. Good morning and thank you for coming today.
Thank you. My name is Paul Zelno and I'm joined by Shirley Rosemond from the Indian River County Sheriff's Office and Victoria Sharp, who's a victim advocate trainee. And I reside at 1670 51st Court here in the county at Vero Beach. And I'm also a victim of crime in the county. as most of you know, my wife died from a drunk driver here 7 years ago. So I'm also a volunteer for the Indian River County Victims' Rights Coalition, and together with the Sheriff's Office and the State Attorney's Office, we increase community awareness of victims' issues, increase victim awareness of community services, and support Victims' Rights Week's activities. So the 19th Judicial Court calendar of events honoring National Crime Victims' Rights Week begins April 6th through the 12th, and lists these following activities for which we invite all community residents and anybody who wants to attend. Sunday, April 6th, is the annual Motorcycle Ride for Rights at 9 o'clock, and it's at the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office right there on Midway Road, and co-sponsored by Okeechobee County Sheriff's Office. It's a ride from St. Lucie County to Okeechobee. Monday, April 7th, is Remembrance Ceremony at 6 o'clock at the St. Lucie County Courthouse, and that's on 2nd Street in Fort Pierce. Tuesday, April 8th, there is a free women's practical self-defense class at 6 o'clock at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, and it's right here on 41st Avenue. Pre-registration is required with Shirley or Julie Stroika. Tuesday, April 8th, we have a practical self-defense class at 6 at the Fort Pierce Police Athletic League on 21st Street as well. And it's pre-registration with a lady by the name of Wendy Holcomb. I have all the phone numbers if anybody cares to get involved or register. Thursday, April 10th, is the Memorial Vigil at 7 o'clock here at Memorial Island in Vero Beach. And that starts at 7, usually runs about an hour.
AM or PM?
Sorry?
AM or PM?
At 7 p.m., sorry, 7 p.m. And it'll be honoring the victims of crime in this county. Sheriff's Office, Third State Attorney's Office, and the Coalition will be present. On Friday, April 11th, there's Appreciation Luncheon at noon in the Old City Hall, and that's on Avenue A in Fort Pierce. Tickets are $25, and if you'd like to attend, please register with Lane Fry from the State Attorney's Office. That's all I have. Just to let you know a little bit more about myself. I talked to the court-ordered DUIs at the Victim Impact Panel once every 2 months, trying to touch some of those people in that room to help maybe stem the tide of drunk drivers so that more lives won't be taken. So with that, I think Shirley has something to say. Shirley?
Good morning, and thank you all so much for having me. In victim services, it's our slogan or motto is, it's not about us, but it's about what we can do to help someone else. And Paul stood here before you this morning, and I worked with Paul many, many years ago when his incident happened with his family. And it's tough. It's very tough working with families, but it's who we are and it's what we do. And I always say that when I go into the homes of families, they don't know me from Adam. But when I leave there, I feel that I've known them for 100 years. And that's what we do. We establish a rapport with them so that we can work with them through their circumstances. And I would also like to add, Paul touched on the agenda of what we're going to be doing for Victim Rights Week. Sunday, our Ride for Rights. It is going to start at St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office. Registration's going to be at 8:30. Kickstands are going to go up at 10 o'clock. And we will ride. I will be riding in my car. I won't be on a motorcycle. But we're going to ride to Okeechobee. And at that time, when we arrive at Okeechobee, Sheriff May is going to do a barbecue for all of the riders. And I'd just like to encourage you, if you ride or if you know someone that rides, please come out and join us. You can go on the Sheriff's Office website and look at the agenda here and get more information. And also about the Women's Practical Self-Defense class. That's going to be a wonderful class. This is the first year that our trainers at the Sheriff's Office is going to be teaching it. And so far, I have 65 to 70 women already signed up. And it's women, it's some moms and daughters. But I tell you what, man, you better get ready because we're learning. We're learning what to do. So please come out and join us and just support us in our victim rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shirley, is there any truth to the rumor that the sheriff has volunteered to be the punching dummy for the self-defense class?
You know, I saw something about that in an email. But we're looking forward to it, and I think we're going to have a great time that evening.
Super. Well, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Either way.
Shirley, do the scroll. Thank you. Thank you. Shirley, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the proclamations and presentations. Moving to the approval of the minutes of February 18, 2014.
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Zork, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That carries unanimously. Under informational items, there's several elections of chairs and vice chairs to committees. There is a vacancy under the Economic Development Council for a local manufacturing representative. So if anyone is interested, that's a local manufacturer. There is a vacancy on the Economic Development Council. And then I would like to mention one of our emergency services fire rescue personnel, Joseph R. Blackburn, is retiring. And he has dedicated 31 years of service to the county. So I'd just like to tell Mr. Blackburn we greatly appreciate his efforts and service on behalf of the citizens of the Indian River County and wish him best of luck in his retirement. Gentlemen, anything else under information? Okay. We will then move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody wish to pull anything from consent?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull F, please.
Shocking.
I was going to pull that for you, actually.
Yeah, I wish you would. I mean,
all right, we have a motion to pull item F. Is there anything else, gentlemen?
8L.
Okay, L. By Commissioner Davis.
Move as amended.
Second. Was there something you needed to
I'd just like to, well, no, that's fine. I'm good. Okay, so we have F and L, and that was motion by
Commissioner Fletcher.
Commissioner Fletcher, second by Commissioner Davis to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there anyone from the audience that would wish to have a consent agenda item pulled for further discussion?
Good morning, Althea McKenzie, 2405 16th Avenue. I'd like to look at item K, please.
Item K?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Move to approve as amended.
Second, yes.
The motion and second are still good? Okay. So we have items F, L, and K pulled. Motion by Commissioner Fletcher, second by Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Commissioner Solari, item F.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, once again, it seems like almost a weekly occurrence now when there's an amendment to the facility lease agreement for Bureautown LLC. I just pulled it, so once again, I could vote against it.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Fletcher. Any discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Next time I'll do it for you.
That motion carries 4-1 vote with Commissioner Solari opposed. Commissioner Davis, item L, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I guess my biggest concern with this is in the event that it comes back in the fear of the unknown.
Commissioner, just for the audience, if you could just state what the item is.
Yes, it's the dredging of the Roseland Lake, clearing up in Roseland.
Okay.
Been working on this for 8 years now, And of course, it's a jurisdictional wetlands. We had to get the permits, and we had to go down the process of getting it all done. And it appears that the uninformed bidder was skeptical of what was there. But in the event that it does wind up being the worst, I'm really of the opinion right now. What I'd like to do is almost fund it to a certain extent. That way, if it does come back with what we know is or what we think is there, we can go ahead and move forward with the project on the funding side of it. So. I just don't want this to flail around in nowhere land. I'd like to go ahead and move this forward and bring it back quickly as we possibly can after getting the information.
Okay, and then just so I'm clear, staff is recommending that they want to obtain additional topographic survey data to give the bidders a better, and you're just saying you want to move that forward?
I just want to move. It's been 8 years.
Okay.
And so after a while, it's getting old. Yeah, it's getting old.
Okay. So, Mr. Baird, can you make sure Public Works moves forward with that, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Move to approve. Second.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Flesher, to move forward with staff recommendation and to expedite the additional data needed to get the bid out. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 5-0. And then item K, Ms. McKenzie. Good morning.
Good morning again. This particular item is a recommendation by your Children's Services Advisory Council to fund next year, and it was kind of confusing. I'm not sure if you're funding next year or if you're agreeing to this year's, but this year's has already passed. The funding remains the same and has remained the same for the past 3 years, actually 2012, 2013, and the recommendation is that it stays the same. Based on the needs that have been expressed either through working with the 211 directory and also listening to a lot of different things that are coming out of the community. Our age group from 14 to 19 in this county is really in need of additional services, and there are some agencies that do provide those services very well, and our recreation department is doing some. However, I'd like the board to consider taking it back to the 2003 level of $1.2 million. We've cut that budget in half, and our needs for youth services in this county are growing daily and arriving more and more in the juvenile justice and also the sheriff's doorstep. So that was the only thing that I wanted to bring to your attention. Even though it was a great recommendation and I'm sure they did some review, I'd like the board to consider investing some more, as we can see from the results of volunteer services and things that you fund, that it does make a big difference. Thank you.
Ms. McKenzie, just one point of clarification. This is not the request from the Children's Services Advisory Committee. This is the staff recommendation. I think if the Children's Services Advisory Committee had their druthers, they would be asking for a lot more. So just this is the staff recommendation that the Children's Services will deal with. I agree with your points, although I would point out the board just a few weeks ago did approve a $32,000 expenditure to do the children's needs assessment for the county. And I think maybe once that assessment is done, then it might be more appropriate to ask for a higher level at that point in time. Although overall I do agree with your concerns, and the number of children aged 0 to 17 in the county is up almost 18% from 2000. So the census data shows there's been an increase. But given the fact the board has already approved the $32,000 for the needs assessment, I think it's appropriate to move forward with that, and then we can take a closer look at the next cycle.
So let me understand, there was an additional $32,000 need assessed, but it's not in staff recommendation.
We've already approved that, so that's moving forward. So that's not part of this recommendation.
Okay, so
that's in the current budget. This is for the 2014-2015
fiscal year,
which would take effect October 1st of this year.
Okay, so Commissioner O'Brien, if I'm understanding correctly, the numbers are the same consistently for the past 3 years, but you did a needs assessment for an additional $33,000, but it's not reflected in these numbers, correct?
That is correct, and we've funded the needs assessment, but it's not been conducted yet.
Okay, but for the purposes of the public, don't you think that you should show that $33,000 increase in next year's recommendation as well?
We're spending it this year.
We're spending it this year.
Okay, you just did a needs assessment. You just said there was an increase.
Right.
But the staff is coming back and saying, let's stay at the same number.
For next year funding.
Yeah. This funding here is what the Children's Services allocates to the various agencies. They go through a fairly rigorous application and review process, and so this $623,890 is what the Children's Services will recommend be appropriated to the various agencies that have applied. That then comes to the board for final approval. The $32,000 is basically a once every 5-year allocation to do the needs assessment, and does not go to any of the particular agencies that do the work, but it is entirely separate analysis done.
Yeah, I would like to point out also, this started out at $81,370 back in 1997-98, so the board has increased this considerably. We could not recommend as a staff going to that level because we'd have to increase ad valorem taxes considerably to cover that.
Okay, so...
There's always, you always have to have a budget, and you always have to live within your means, and that's what we're trying to do.
So you're living within your means for children at $623,000, but for the Humane Society, you're willing to give them almost 3/4 of that budget. There's a need...
We don't, we do not give the Humane Society, they do a service. We pay them, it's a contractual arrangement. We do not fund them as an agency. It's a contractual arrangement. Rather than us, when we get an animal, they house it for us rather than us housing an animal and having the facility. So that's a contractual arrangement. It's not a gift.
I see. All right, well, I think we can invest more in our children. That was the point I was trying to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion for staff recommendation from Commissioner Slurry, second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. That concludes the consent agenda. There's no items under constitutional officers. That takes us to public items, a public hearing. The first item is 3 Dogs and a Horse, LLC's request for a special exemption use approval for an agricultural business to be known as Audrey's Feed Store. This memorandum is dated March 3rd, 2014. This item is quasi-judicial, so before we start, I'll go through the checklist that Mr. Reingold so professionally gave to me as I lost the first one. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding. The parties to the proceeding are Indian River County and 3 Dogs and a Horse, LLC. The first thing to do is, gentlemen, have you had any ex parte communications, site visits, or independent investigations? Commissioner Fletcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have dogs. I don't have a horse, and I haven't discussed that or this topic with anyone.
Very good. Commissioner Davis?
Yes. I've had site visits, numerous. I buy my feed there, down at Audrey's, where they currently exist.
Okay.
And asked every time I'd stop by, I'd just see how the process is going for them, not necessarily anything other than has it been tolerable and fast enough. And the answer's always been no, it's not been tolerable. It's never fast enough. But with that said, I can certainly keep an open mind. And
that'll be the next question.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And yes, I need more feed.
Put the horse before the cart there.
Because your daughter did buy another steer. I understand.
She's feeding one right now. Exactly.
All right.
Yes.
Very good. The only thing I have done is I have driven by the proposed site, but have not spoken to anybody. Commissioner Zork.
Same, driven by the site, but not have had any conversations with anyone.
And Commissioner Slurry.
I've certainly driven by the site, but not in order to see it for this matter, and I don't recall any conversations with anybody about this matter.
Okay, and Commissioner Slurry, we'll start back on your end, and you will be able to have a open mind and base your decision on the evidence presented and applicable law.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Zari?
Yes.
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 Okay. We will now open the public hearing. And is there anyone that wishes to speak on this matter? Please stand, and the clerk will swear you in. All those that wish to speak, please stand.
Raise your right hand. Second. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then we will go ahead with the presentation by county staff. Mr. Stan Bowling, the Community Development Director. Stan, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Stan Bowling, Community Development Director. This is a special exception use request in an agriculturally zoned and agriculturally designated area, and as a special exception use, there are specific criteria that must be satisfied by the request, as well as general criteria regarding the appropriateness and compatibility of the use. There are 2 public hearings for any special exception request, including this one. There's been 1 hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, which voted to recommend approval, and this hearing this morning before the Board of County Commissioners. So this morning the Board is to consider the request, to either approve it with conditions, or to deny it. The subject site is approximately 17 acres in size, located at the northeast corner of Oslo Road, also known as North 9th Street Southwest, and 66th Avenue. The overall site, again, approximately 17 acres, is shaded in gray. The area of development of the actual proposed feed store and associated facilities is shown in red. It's about 2 3/4 acres. The entire area is zoned A1. Agricultural all the way around, and is designated A1 and lies outside the urban service area. Generally speaking, retail stores and such activities are allowed only within our commercial industrial areas, within the urban service area, usually at major roadway intersections, but there are exceptions, and this is one for an agricultural business. And as long as the board can determine that it is appropriate for this business to be located out in the agricultural area, it can be approved. And staff's position is that it is appropriate because it serves uses out, in fact, agricultural uses out in the agricultural area. What is proposed is a feed store, feed and tack, and other related items for retail sales, and it's an appropriate location. The proposed site plan is overlaid on the overall site here. What will occur on most of the site, some type of green or agricultural type of use, and the area development is located close to the intersection itself. You can see some of the footprint of the parking area and the building itself. A closer look at the site plan that accompanies this application shows a couple of entrances off of 66th Avenue for good circulation through the site. A main building, which is where the retail sales as well as some storage will occur toward the north end, retail sales toward the south end. And then a second building, a hay barn. Again, the site circulation is good, has been approved by the Public Works Director. No off-site traffic improvements are required. Also want to show that the plan shows sidewalks along 66th Avenue and Oslo Road. They can be constructed with the project or bonded out and eventually connected up with sidewalks as they come in along those major roadways. With respect to landscaping, there are arterial roadway landscape buffers proposed around the project on the 66th Avenue and Oslo Road sides, and a type B buffer on the north side of the area development where the property is the closest to some 5-acre lots that are north of the project site. I will say that those lots are more than 600 feet to the north, and so although this is a type B buffer, it doesn't have to be intensely planted because of that distance, but it does meet those type B buffer requirements. I will also point out that the applicant worked quite well with staff. All the improvements that are shown here are outside the ultimate right-of-way for Oslo Road and 66th Avenue. So there should be no conflict in the future when right-of-way is acquired. Additional right-of-way is acquired for 66th or Oslo Road, and there is a 10-foot dedication along the site's Oslo Road frontage, which the applicant has agreed to. One of the other things that staff wanted to point out was the architecturals. This is a conceptual architectural looking from 66th Avenue, somewhat close to where one of the entrances will be on 66th Avenue. And a couple of things to point out. One of the issues in the past has been when an agricultural business locates in an agricultural area, a warehouse-looking sort of building is something that can be a bit of an issue. In this case, not only are there corridor requirements along major roadways now, but also the applicant's gone above and beyond. And the type of and style that they're proposing, in staff's opinion, fits in with residential uses, agricultural uses, or even some institutional uses in the area, such as daycare, that type of thing. So staff does need to look at the final architectural plans, but I think the applicant has done a good job with the architectural plans, and we just wanted to comment upon that. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend that the board grant special exception use approval with the conditions that are outlined in staff's report, and that is staff's recommendation as well, that the board grant special exception approval for Audrey's Feed Store with the 4 conditions in staff's report regarding dedicating Oslo Road right-of-way, gaining approval of the final architectural plans, constructing the buffers as shown, and constructing or bonding out for sidewalks. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions of staff?
I do, just real quick.
Commissioner Davis?
Now, we have urban services on Oslo Road, correct?
66th Avenue and Oslo Road, yes, at this location. They're proposing to hook up to water, which they're allowed to do as an agricultural business, and have a septic system.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to confirm that.
Yes.
And Stan, this won't impact the normal use, the A1 use of the remainder of the site?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Okay, any other from the commissioners?
I just want to ask Wesley if it's going to be too fancy for him after it gets done.
Actually, the facility she has right now is very, very user-friendly, very nice, and I'm wondering who's manning the store. Kelly? Okay, all right.
All right, is there anyone representing Three Dogs and a Horse that has questions of the staff presentation?
Nay.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Hey. That was almost too easy.
That was. Tell me that song.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Okay, it's going to be that. Does anyone from Three Dogs and a Horse wish to make a presentation? Okay. Moving right along. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on the proposed special use exemption? Any input from the public? Okay, I see none at this point. Final presentations. Stan, anything further to add?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anything further to add from Three Dogs and a Horse? Okay.
You're enjoying that too much.
Oh, yeah, he's got me started now. Okay, so everything has been submitted. Everything is in the hands of the clerk, and at that point, I can close the public hearing. We'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, I remind you that your decision must be based upon the evidence and applicable law. Is there any discussion?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Davis. The only thing I would just like to add briefly is last time we considered something like this was the A1 Wally, the demolition recycling plant. And when I looked at the adjacent uses, and in my mind I had a single-family home, an organic farm, and a cattle ranch. To me, clearly, the demolition recycling was not compatible with those allowed uses within the A1 land use. Looking at those same uses, a single-family residence, an organic farm, and a cattle operation, I can't think of a use more appropriate to be put next to that. So I am very much supportive and in favor of this motion. I think clearly delineates the difference between compatible use and non-compatible use. Commissioner Slory?
I'd like to add that given that this is an agricultural area, if we actually want to support the agriculture, and my guess is over time this is going to sort of migrate more towards gentleman farming, this type of use on this land will actually promote that. So it'll promote agriculture in the area and make it more likely that it stays agriculture. So it's
absolutely
wonderfully appropriate.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, y'all, and you're off and running. Next public hearing is a proposed ordinance amending the code for general housekeeping purposes. Memorandum dated March 25th, 2014. This is legislative in nature, and Mr. Reingold, your presentation.
Thank you to the chair, and to the commission and the audience and those watching. This is an item of an ordinance code cleanup bill that we presented to the commission today. Through the years, there have been changes to the code, changes in our organizational structure, and we just felt that it was needed to this ordinance was needed in order to help make our ordinance code consistent with those various changes through time. I would like to note that Nancy in our office worked really hard on putting this ordinance together. Please note that there will be a separate ordinance that will be coming through to the commission at a later time that will deal with these types of changes in the LDRs. Because of the LDRs have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission before they come to the board, we thought it was best to bring this item separately than the LDR ones. It was a little bit more effective that way. Based upon all that information, staff recommends that you open up the public hearing, take whatever public comments are offered, close the public hearing, and vote to approve the ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that wishes Mr. Johnson? Good morning, Bob. Welcome.
Good morning. Bob Johnson, Crow Subdivision. I have a question on procedure of approval. We're getting ready to just go to require this to go to the Planning and Zoning before it comes to the County Commission for approval, final approval.
Dylan, I believe the answer is yes, but...
Well, this ordinance would not require going to Planning and Zoning Commission because it does not touch on any of the LDRs in our ordinance code. What I referenced was there's a separate bill that's going to be doing some cleanup with regards to the LDRs in our ordinance code. And when that bill comes forward pursuant to our ordinance code requirements, that bill will travel to the Planning and Zoning Commission before it comes to this board. And both bodies will have public hearings on the item. I hope that clears up the question, sir.
I have a question on the last bill that was passed by Planning and Zoning was by 5-0 on the Planning and Zoning. What if that had been a 4-1 vote? Would that have been considered satisfactory approval by the Planning and Zoning to be moved forward? Or
you got to have. There's a 7-member board, so it should be 4. That would be correct. Bob?
Is there plans to fill those vacancies so it's a full 7?
I believe there are 7 members, just 2 of them were not present at that particular meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
We had a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last week that I attended, and there were 6 of the 7 were present.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to comment on the proposed ordinance? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Gentlemen?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dylan. Takes us to public discussion items. Number 1, a request to speak from Harlan Franklin and Alex Jernigan regarding a water line extension, North Indian River Drive to Roseland Road. Gentlemen, welcome. If you could give your name and address for the record up at the podium, please.
I'm Harlan Franklin. I live at 13680 North Indian River Drive in Sebastian.
He left us standing there on April Fool's.
I'm Alex Jernigan, and I'm a neighbor of his and a friend of his. I am not affected by this request.
Okay.
Well, my request is for you gentlemen to help us get county water. There's county water a block to the north of us and 2 blocks to the south of us, but we're in a gap between the inlet condominiums in Roseland, and we need county water where we are. The county needs to close the loop between these 2 areas. All the residents that live there want county water. I must admit that those that don't live there are not as enthusiastic about it as we are, but those who live there are the people that's really affected by not having county water. And let me tell you, it's expensive to be on well water. You have to treat the water, then you have to buy water to drink, and then the treated water still is very, very hard on your appliances. And my wife went over the bills that we pay for the use of our well, and we're paying $1,000 a year just to use our well, and that does not include the problems with the appliances, does not include the maintenance on the well. And I've got to tell you that when the pumps go out and water seizes, that always happens on Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning. So we would ask you, please help us get county water.
Okay. Mr. Franklin, I know I met with you and a couple of the other neighbors, and I believe you had individual meetings with all the commissioners. Is that correct?
I've had what?
Did you meet individually with all the other commissioners?
Yes,
on this?
we did.
Right. And just for the public, what Mr. Franklin's talking about is there's existing water, and if we run it northward along Indian River Drive, incorporating the majority of residents that want the water, we're at about, I think there's a 63% of the lot owners wanted it. And
so homeowners, residents, right?
No, the 63 is all of the lot owners.
Okay. No.
It's almost 100% of the people that live there, but the absentees, so we're at 63% for that segment, which is very close to our normal 67%. And then if we run it all the way up to US 1 to form a loop, those northern property owners aren't interested, so that percent drops to 58. So part of the decision is, do we just extend it a little bit north and incorporate most of those that want the water, or do we do the full loop and tie in so we have more of a loop system? My understanding from what staff has said is that if we do the full loop, because we're benefiting by looping the system, it would be a 70-30 cost share. But if we only do the extension for the owners, that might just be 100% because we're not getting the loop benefit. I think, Vinny, if I'm wrong, if you can let me know, but I think that's where we are in this.
And in addition to that, Mr. Chairman, if I could, just procedurally here, where I am with this is A, I want to confirm the best way to move this off center. And then, of course, I'm sure we're going to hear some blowback from those individuals that don't want it. And so, Vinny, for us to move this in a direction to where we can start to speak more intelligently about it, or is this at the point where we've already done all the research, already done the engineering and everything, we're ready to go, and now this is just a formality? But so yes, tell me.
Just to elaborate. For the record, Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. I want to thank Kevin for putting this map together. This is the map that was talked about for the donut hole between Roseland here and where the water line currently stops at the terminus here. We looked at the two different areas. On the southern portion of the screen where you have some of the houses in blue, you'll see the red star. This is where we have currently temporary water service connections for some of the residents. Mr. Harlan Franklin lives up in the northern portion of this area here, and he does not currently have water services. I know that he has been exasperated in trying to move this process forward, so I have to apologize for Mr. Franklin for the delay in trying to get you water, but we have looked at some of the services and trying to come up with a solution. Back in November or October of 2013, myself, Arjuna Varagoda, and Dylan, the county attorney, went up to the City Hall to present some of the information with potential cost to some of the residents, in a hope of trying to get the majority of folks to sign a petition to try to move this process forward to bring it to the board. Currently, we do not have enough folks, at least, to be able to bring that process forward. So I think Mr. Franklin is here today to ask the board to look at alternative methods. We looked at the two options. One was the extension of this red line here, which is on the center line here. In that situation, we're looking at scenario number 2, where we have 17 benefiting properties, but that would be 100% of the cost bore by those residents that are there, that are not apart from Florida, that would benefit from connecting to the water. Or we looked at the scenario number 1, which would be to loop the service, which is what staff would probably recommend. We don't like to have existing extensions because you do have some water quality issues, and if for some reason you had a break down near the southern portion of this line, it would affect all the other customers up along the way. So we'd like to loop the service for better water quality and better redundancy in the system, but that comes with a cost share allocation. So we do not quite have the 66% of folks that would be able to move this process forward at this point in time.
May I make a statement, please?
Yes, sir.
The staff wants to loop it. That's my understanding. So if you went ahead and loop it, you would consider that us residents are, the county wants to loop it. If you go ahead and loop it, we, the residents, are helping the county pay for that process.
Do you have a favorite whether it's looped or
You know,
just get water?
we went down this road.
Wesley, I'm here representing my wife. She just wants water.
I'm with you. Everybody asks me who I work for. I work for my wife. That's exactly it. So I'm with you.
Doing a fine job.
Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that if it's looped with the 70-30 split, that the individual customer wouldn't be paying any more than if it were not looped. So the county's not getting any economic bargain out of the deal. The choices are, do we go up just to basically past your property line, in which case it'll be one cost to you, but if we loop it with the 70-30 split, it'll still be the same or lower cost to you, but the county would get the benefit of a loop system, which you and the whole system would share. So we're not doing anything which gives us an added benefit at your expense. It's if we do something, we want to make sure that we do the right thing and get the best benefit for the entire system.
We used to never cost share even if we were looping it. It started on 66th Avenue, which was probably one of our worst financial decisions in our utility. To loop that, we got one customer. How much money do we have in it? Vinny, on 66th Avenue, the looping?
We've only got one customer connected to
But how much money do we have in that total?
for both phases, I say about
$300,000, and we continue to do that, we won't be an enterprise fund anymore. I don't think we should ever cost share, even if we're looping. I think it should be all. I don't think the county can continue to absorb that, or we will be in trouble. That's my opinion.
But I think here, Joe, how I would look at this one is if we loop it and we cost share it, it would still be a mandatory assessment, so that we would be assessing all the properties within the area like we normally do. My concern there is, though, if we go down that road, we're bringing in more property owners that are not in favor, and so I think we're going to have bigger headwinds. I think if we just extend it to those within the scenario 2 there, just the range of the more willing homeowners, I'm much more amenable to arguing 63% is enough to move forward with a mandatory assessment than the other scenario, and that's just my opinion. But
I'm right where you are, Commissioner, and yeah. I guess really, if somebody would just give me some insight on what you need to hear from this board to let there be water to at a minimum to create a spur. Now, if in the event that somebody has an epiphany and they to the north of Mr. Harlan says they'd like to have water, then that something might change. But right now, I'm at a minimum ready for something.
Well, Vinny, have you done enough survey and engineering work that these numbers are pretty hard that we can?
Again, we haven't done any survey work, but this is just some numbers that we at staff tried to put together so that we could give as much information as possible at the City Hall meeting to residents in 2013.
What I would maybe suggest, and as we do, kind of like what we did with the Indian River Aerodrome, is to authorize staff to proceed and do the 70% surveying and engineering to where we would have a pretty hard, firm price. We then take it back to the property owners that have signed up and say, okay, here's your number. Are you willing to sign the petition again? Realizing that, the next step is you're going to pay for it. And then if we're still with the same numbers, then we can go ahead and move forward. But I think that's what I would like to see, is let's go ahead and do the 70% design and survey and engineering, get a hard number, go back to those folks, and if they're all still in, then I'd be willing to move forward.
And I would like to go ahead and do it for the scenario 1 and 2. That way,
We have both numbers?
We're dealing, just like in the airdrome, if it doesn't get looped, we can always put it on the shelf, and one of these days it will be.
You know, and that affords another opportunity, too. I know that these two individuals have gone door to door, parcel to parcel, person to person, at least, you're saying 3 times. I know that there just might be one holdout, and that holdout would give you the percentage.
We need one more vote to get the proper percentage.
There's one property owner on the straight system, and on the loop system, I think you need additional. And if that's the case, I think we should look at both scenarios, and perhaps we can not be put on the edge by looking at breaking a barrier and looking at the percentages a little differently.
Commissioner Davis, was that a motion?
That was a motion. Let's go ahead and move forward with the design of 1 and 2.
Okay, and under discussion,
I think that the Commission's going in the right direction with this. I don't know at all where I'd be on the vote, but I need the information that staff would come to get it, and I'd also need to hear from any other residents who might be against it. But I think that going forward the way Commissioner Davis outlined today is the right thing.
Okay, good. Commissioner Zork?
Just one comment, and thanks for the meetings that you held with all the different commissioners, that some of the property on the west side of the street is zoned either multifamily or townhouse, in particular the piece that's directly north of the condominium building there. That one thing that the vacant property owners that may be kind of sitting on the fence going, well, I don't want to do something now, that their ability to utilize their property to its fullest extent when water is available becomes greatly increased.
It's my understanding that one of the property owners that owns...
It's on the bottom of the screen?
Yes, right there.
Right, yeah.
Is going to develop that into several units.
Subdivided.
Mm-hmm. And he maintains that he can do it himself cheaper in the future. But I don't think that he's going to be able to get a permit to put multiple units there without hooking up to county water. Now,
right.
You guys know I don't, but it just seems to me that he would have to have county water.
Right.
And if he would go ahead and agree to that now, we'd have the proper percentage. We just need one
right.
vote.
And also, once we have the 70% engineering and actual closer cost numbers, the cost potentially could decrease some. It also can go the other way too, as these things go once the survey's done. But I think those vacant property owners, that to somehow communicate to them the benefit of the water and the use of their property, I think one of them has a for sale sign on it. I don't remember which one it was, but that's definitely a selling feature in that area for them to be aware of. Thank you.
And then, just so it's very clear to the public and to the residents up there, that the cost of the survey and engineering work we're going to do now, if the project does not move forward, that cost will be absorbed by the county. Right. So there's no cost to the residents if this project does not move forward. It's going to be borne by the county, and if the project does move forward, then that cost is rolled into the overall project cost. But if the residents decide they do not want to move forward, and this board votes not to move forward, those costs for the engineering and survey work are entirely borne by the county, and no resident will have to pay towards that.
The reason for that is those plans don't get old.
Right.
Once we do the work is we pick it up off the shelf whenever you get one vote and move forward. So that's the thought process behind it.
Just remember from the Indian River Airdrome, they were concerned about that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, one other comment was just a clarification that those funds would actually come out of the utility enterprise fund, not the general fund from the county. So in using the word county, it's the enterprise fund from utilities.
Thank you. That's very correct. Yeah. The motion from Commissioner Davis is to have staff get detailed survey and engineering work to develop a firm cost for both Scenario 1 and Scenario 2 that will then be presented back to the property owners, and then board will take action after that point. and that was seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Is there anyone from the public? This is, public discussion item. We are taking action. So anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this? Okay. Seeing none, we have a motion, a second. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries forward. So, Mr. Franklin, thank you for your efforts. Once staff has this done, we'll get back with you and we'll proceed from there, okay?
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming down. Appreciate it. Next is a request to speak from Jackie Warrior regarding Governor Scott's race-based educational goals. Good morning, Dr. Warrior. Good to see you again.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Jacqueline Warrior. I live at 4190 East 16th Square. A suggestion about, I think you could increase attendance at these meetings if it wasn't freezing in here.
Believe me, sometimes it gets heated.
Does it get, sometimes you Okay. Well, I have nothing more to say. I was invited by Mr. Beard's office to be present at this meeting this morning. I think the commissioners tabled or did something with the request and requesting staff to do more research on the issue that I brought before you last week. I noticed in your addendum you printed out the entire strategic plan as well as some data supplied by the Indian River County School District, which I also have seen copies of. So I'm here at your request.
Dr. Warrior, when Commissioner Zork made his comments when you were here before, it kind of struck me. And then looking at the backup, a couple things struck me is yes, you are correct that the reading and math goals are different for different races of students. That's very clear looking at the backup. But when I look at what the current level is for all the students, and I think your interest is probably the African American students, in reading they're currently at 38% proficiency. The 2017-2018 goal is 74%. Now that's a 95% increase from their current level to the 4-year goal. The backup does say that those goals will be reviewed in 2014 and 2015, and that the overall goal of the entire program is that all students will be proficient in reading and math by the 2022-2023 school year.
You're correct.
And looking at the math numbers, the African American students are at 40%. The 4-year target is 74%. That's an 85% increase in that level. I understand very much your concerns. But from my point, just looking at the overall numbers and the final goal of all students getting there, just from where I'm sitting, I'm not an educator, but it seems to me that they had to put in some reasonably attainable goals. And I would think taking some of these groups of students and saying, okay, you're sub 50%, but in 4 years we want you at 100%, might be unattainable, and that might even be a negative to the student because they look at that and say, oh, I'll never make that, so I'm just going to quit and not even try. I think it's better, to give them an attainable goal, let them get there, and then you move the goal up and move the goal up. And again, the goal is to have all students there. Again, I'm not an educator, I'm not an expert, but just to me, it seems they're taking reasonable steps for progress of all the students, but you have to realize they're all starting at different levels, and it may not be appropriate to say, okay, in 4 years, everybody's got to be at 100%, but let's take where you are and get you moving and keep making progress and eventually get everybody there. So with that, I think in principle, what you wanted sounded good, but looking at the numbers, I think I'm probably leaning just, letting the state and the school district, do this as they are the experts. But that's my...
May I make a comment to that?
Absolutely, Dr. Warrior.
Or would you like to go first, Commissioner Davis?
No, please, go ahead.
I understand, and that's the argument the state of Florida made in 2013 or 2011 to the federal government, because they had said that by 2013, 2014, our students would be at a much higher, all students would be at a much higher level. So in order not to receive any repercussions from the fact that they had failed to meet the standard, these lower standards based on race were submitted. And one of the things that I'd like to say to you is that sounds very reasonable and very logical, and that's the argument that is being put forth to the public and to the community. But one of the things I'd like to remind you, if you remember, or whether you're aware or not, Indian River County still remains under a desegregation order from 1965. That order was revised in 1999. And so we've been talking about these issues for a long time, and yet we still, with our educators, have not, I guess, figured out a way to bring students to any greater level of proficiency. And so my concern, and one of the things you said, Commissioner O'Brien, at the last meeting has stayed on my mind. I believe in the theory of equality. And I think that's part of the issue, that maybe most of you believe in the theory of equality. And what I'm asking is the practice of equality. Because we're talking about almost 50 years under a deseg order, and this school district has remained out of compliance. It's never been in compliance. It still isn't in compliance. There is no place on record where it plans to be in compliance. And I feel that it forces us back to things like reopening the deseg order. I mean, it's sitting in the courts. It can be, it can be filed again, and to start the order. And so to say, well, gee, Dr. Warrior, in maybe 2023, but, that's the promise I heard in, when we were moving towards 2013, and we made it to 38%. If you notice the gap for African American students, and you said African American students, then actually just had a meeting, and so I'm interested in African American and Hispanic students. I can't speak for the Hispanic community in the same way. I'm trying to make connections there so that there are people from that community that can also speak to these issues. So I'm saying, yes, we can wait, and yes, wouldn't it be great if they would be, above 38, but I'm saying 50 years and we're at 38%, Commissioner O'Brien. So yeah, the theory of equality, I guess, sounds good. What we're asking is for the practice of equality. As you know, the Southern Poverty Law Center and I guess the AIDS, a group in Palm Beach County, have now filed a civil rights complaint against the state of Florida. And the hope at first was to negotiate and work out a better plan rather than to go into court and mediate and start other complaints. Then I feel like this kind of is where it leaves us with these.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Commissioner Davis?
I'm well aware of the desegregation orders. I've had the opportunity to sit on the school board for 6 years. And in fact, that was a part of the decision at Dodgertown whenever they needed, the numbers were so out of line as far as the numbers of white children and black children that were outside the desegregation order. We had to take 150 white children and relocate them to Dodgertown. They all came out of the Vero Lake Estates area, didn't get to go to the closest school. In fact, my two kids were involved in that move and went to Dodgertown, in a great school. And so I understand a lot of the complexities about it, but in looking at this versus where we are today and where we were last week, first of all, I understand a little bit more about it. Where I am with goals, though, I think, Dr. Warrior, you and I agree. You might not reach 100% of your goals, but you should set high goals. The old adage is, aim for the stars because you just might hit the moon, and I get that. And so, but I guess really where I am on this today, though, is this. When you were here last time, you wanted a resolution to the governor, and I'm not there. I mean, this is the Department of Education. Is the governor responsible for this just as much as every legislator is too? And it's the Secretary of Education is no longer an elected position. At the person at the top, and really the place where I think that the efforts would be more prudently spent would be in front of the local school board here. I don't know if you've taken up this issue with them, where they are, and if they're embracing it. A resolution by this board is, I don't mean it in a bad way, but it's not a very effective use of paper, more importantly, of anybody's time that can really do something about this in the event that it's going in the wrong direction.
Right. I don't know if resolution and a letter of support. What I asked was a letter of support that said we support the same level, an equal level of education for all children. Perhaps that is the same of a resolution, and if you see it as a waste of paper, I can certainly understand and respect that.
If it's a letter just like that,
I have no problem with that.
We can send it and be happy to send it, because I believe each one of us has that as an overall goal.
Absolutely.
I think the hesitancy is trying to get into an area that we really know nothing about. And it's always hard to try to step into another governmental unit when you don't know the context. And I think that's basically what Commissioner O'Brien was trying to explain. But I'd be happy to move that this board just send a letter which says that the goal ought to be an equal education with equal results for all members of our community.
Well, you're not going to have equal results, because I don't mean this in a bad way. You're smarter than I am.
That's shooting for the stars. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
That ought to be the goal. I understand you're not going to have, and that's why they changed this from, I think it was because of the No Child Left Behind, they had the goal of everybody having 100% proficiency, right. And they realized that, my guess, just from reading some of the backup, was that, that goal was unrealistic. Let's do something, again, that's realistic, and that's why we have the new numbers, which Dr. Worry objects to. Mm-hmm. So, I'm not in any way suggesting.
And I think if you look overall at all children in Indian River County, the goals aren't magnificent. I think the sort of an average proficiency level is 61%, and I guess in terms of economic development and well-being of the community, that we would like to see that raised too. But again, you're correct that I'm asking for a letter of support. I don't know exactly what you mean by a resolution, but what I'm saying is a letter of support that we endorse that the target for all children is 100%, that we're not shooting for 74% for African Americans and 60% for someone and 90% for Asian and 88%. I mean, because that brings us back into segregation, and that's what the civil rights complaint is all about, that now you've segregated kids in the same courtroom. So the movement of kids all around this county, I think one thing that certainly I am aware of, that just putting our kids next to white kids in school does not get the same results for our children, and something more needs to be looked at. And so now to set these standards within the schoolhouse is sort of de facto segregation, but we'll do it in the umbrella of having everybody in the same room. So on paper it'll look like integration, because we've bused our kids all over the world, and African American kids were bused. We've historically been bused everywhere.
The Gifford community has sent to
Fort Pierce.
To Oslo, the Oslo Middle School.
And before that, children were bused, to Fort Pierce.
You're exactly right, and that did go both ways. And of course, I'm of the opinion that a community school should be a community school, and kids should, and children and families, it's a hub of a community center, if you will. And so, that we can debate the merits of it. Everybody, the intent is good. The merits, I don't know. I'll just keep my opinion to myself on that.
And I'm sure we all have varying opinions.
Right. Thanks.
Commissioner Zork?
Yes, just one other item is also to focus your efforts on Gary Chartrand. He's the chairman of the Florida Department of Education. Mm-hmm. He is very pro-Common Core. This program that we're looking at, this document, is part of a byproduct of the Common Core curriculum, which we now read that that kids from kindergarten through 5th grade will no longer get A through F grades. You're going to get an M. So I can just see the bumper stickers on the cars. Now, my student makes the M roll at my school. You talk about disincentivizing people to achieve, that they're going to throw away their whole grading system. Part of the, again, it's all part of the Common Core program. But Gary Chartrand, very pro Common Core. This is part of, he's in charge of the Department of Education. Pam Stewart runs it, but he is the chairman of the Department of Education. And he has no problem reminding people that Pam Stewart, appointed by the governor, but does not answer to the governor, answers to the Board of Education and himself, Gary Chartrand. So make sure you include correspondence and reach out to him as well.
There's correspondence. I can give you a list of the people that we are sending letters, and you are welcome to also send letters to those people. Believe me, we did not pick you guys out uniquely to ask you to do this. There are a number of groups and citizens and to address these issues.
And just, Dr. Warrior, if it's the consensus of the board to sign the letter, I'll be glad to sign it. But again, I caution you, look at the individual student, and to get them from 40% to 90% in 4 years is going to require an accelerated curriculum. Okay? I mean, that's the only way you can do it. And if you accelerate that curriculum beyond what the child can assimilate, he or she will fall further and further behind and not make any progress. Okay? So, I would just caution you to think what you're asking for here. I understand your theory and stuff, but in practicality, look at that individual student. You might run over him with the bus because you want to set this high standard that he's not capable of achieving in 4 years, and he or she will fall further behind. And so I just caution you that sometimes when you ask for something too big, it's going to go the other way on you. And so I would just caution you to keep that in mind, because the only way, if you want them all at 92%, then he's got to do an advanced curriculum that he or she may not be able to handle, and then you're going to lose them completely. So, I would just say, is 85% improvement for all the students a bad goal, or do you want less than that because we shot too high? And I just caution you and warn you on that.
I hear Commissioner Bryan. If you were saying that to me in 1965, perhaps I could address it better.
Dr.
One of the things,
I wasn't here.
the issue isn't just whether that student can handle it. It's whether our school system looks at children who are not achieving and figure out how to apply the resources and the way to educate these children. These, in other states and in other cities and in other schools, this is being done. But I hear what you're saying. But, if the school district continues to do the same thing that is historically done, I'll be back here in another 20 years, and we'll see that maybe they're at 40%, and I'll hear the same arguments. And what I'm hoping this will do is not just throw the onus on the student, but cause a whole school system and a whole educational system to look at how it educates our children.
Right.
And I hear your caution,
and
I accept it.
Dr. Warner, there's so many things that affect a child's performance outside of what the school district can do. You have, single parents. You have no parents in some homes. You have the grandmother watching the kids. You have poverty. You have kids that don't have hot meals. So, again, I'm looking at the students and what they're capable of doing, given their overall circumstance, and I just believe that if you try to shove them up too high, they're going to fall and fail.
Commissioner, and this will be my last thing because we won't debate it, but you sit on the executive round table.
Yes, ma'am.
And at that table are all the people, our school superintendent, our sheriff, everybody that's supposed to be anybody in Indian River County with any authority in making decision. Those are the places. I'm not saying it is just the school. There are a number of factors, and single parent households is not necessarily one of them. I have 3 children in a single-parent household, and all of mine are, college graduates, and I have a surgeon and a university professor and a daughter. So those kinds of issues are sort of fallacious in and of themselves. But I know that it is larger than the school district. But you sit on the executive roundtable, and that's where I would think, and I know that you're searching for a project to look at, and if it's the well-being of children, I suggest maybe the kinds of things that make up those. This is where you come together with the people that supposedly have all the resources and all the authority-making power to make those decisions. And as I said, this conversation could go on, and I'm sure that I may be in each one of your offices over the next however long I am able to talk, looking at these issues, because I don't think they will go away. And I certainly am not naive enough to think they will go away, or that Governor Scott is going to change his decision because he got a letter from the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County. I would just like you to make a statement in our county that says we support equality of education for all children, and it's up to all the rest of you professionals and community people to figure out how to make that happen.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr.
And
Porter.
we've already, I believe Commissioner Solari already wanted to go in that direction. I second it.
Okay.
And, Mr. Chairman?
Ms. McKenzie, do you have a comment?
My name is Althea McKenzie, and I'm listening to this conversation, and I was fine up to the point of Commissioner O'Brien cautioning Ms. Warrior in what she's wanting for our children. But then listening to your comments, Commissioner O'Brien, I'm a single parent, and there are factors that affect children, but being a single parent is not one of them. And there's no data presented that shows that single-parent families, which in the United States right now have excelled to about 65%, that affects the performance of a child. What does affect the performance of a child is whether you establish lower-level expectations. Because when you have lower-level expectations, the child will rise only to that barrier and no further. And right now in our school system, we have 5 different tiers to where these children are being directed. They're either in advanced placement, regular placement, Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 classes. The unfortunate part of the tiering is once a child is designated into Tier 3, no matter how well they perform, no matter if they get an A++++, they can never graduate to Tier 3. Because they have never been taught Tier 2 curriculum. We are making these decisions based on 8-year-old children. And sometimes children don't get it until later on. Sometimes the bulb doesn't go off in math class until you hear it over and over again. But to deliver a lower level curriculum to a child is wrong. And I would rather my children get a C in an A class than get an A in a C class. And some of your statements, sir, if you have an opportunity to go back and listen to them, I think they're limited, and I think having lower expectations produces lower results. When you tell a child that they can achieve, and you give them the tools, and you keep them focused, and you keep them driven, they can achieve. It's not the minimum standards. And this county, not just in the school district, but we operate at minimum standards. And it's time for us to have higher expectations for our educators, and taxpayers need to be upset about this process. Because no matter if you are homestead or if you've got your senior thing and you don't have to pay property tax anymore, you still have to contribute to that $180 million trough for the school district. And I've never seen a business operate like the school district, where you get $180 million at the beginning of process. You can produce 17,000 socks, but we don't care what the socks look like. We don't care if they fit. We don't care if they're the same color. We don't care if the two make a pair. And next year we go back and we give them another $180 million while we have a 40% dropout rate at 10th grade. We're starting to look at another increase of dropout rate at 8th grade. And when these kids are 14 years old and they have nowhere to go and nothing to do, and the school district is not committed to giving them more than a 10-year education, because that's in their booklet, and they don't care. Because I asked my 26-year-old, why does the school district not focus on college placement? Why are they not concerned about dropout? She says, Mommy, you know why? Because for every 10th grader that drops out, there's 6 kindergartners coming behind them, and they're worth the same dollar amount. So nobody cares. And the kids believe that we don't care when we set lower standards for them. I set high standards for my children. I don't do homework. They do their own. They are successful because the messages that they receive is that I believe in them and they can do whatever they want to do as long as they put their mind to it. And I personally take offense to the comment about single parents, and I believe that is not a factor. I believe a child's success is based on what the community invests into them, and that's it, period.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. Commissioner Slaughter, would you like to restate your motion just so we're clear?
Yes. The motion is basically to compose a letter to be signed by the chairman on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners to Governor Scott, which would support, and it doesn't have to be worded this way, the basic ideas are that Indian River County supports equality of education for all members of our community, that at the end of the day, not those words, the overall goal is for all children, regardless of race or origin, become proficient in the skills the school ought to provide, and that we believe that the best thing to do is to look at each child as an individual that needs an education and not as any member of any race or source of origin. So that's the letter. And wish them luck to achieve that.
Are you good on that?
I'm good on that. I'm good on that, and I'll be happy to add this to the letter campaign that I've accumulated this morning.
Very good. Okay, and Commissioner Fleischer, you're still good on the second?
Absolutely. I wish that the initial blush that Dr. Warrior took on this took root, but I believe that this is a step in the right direction.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 5-0. Let me just read the public, and then we'll take a break for the public discussion for the community development. Mr. Dillon, would you please read the public notice items?
I would be happy to do so. The notice of scheduled public hearings, these are public hearings for April 15th, 2014. The first item is Grand Harbor Community Association, Inc. and G.H. Vero Beach Development, LLC's request for a comprehensive plan future land use map amendment to redesignate plus or minus 8.3 acres located at the southwest corner of Indian River Boulevard and Grand Harbor Boulevard from CI to M-1 and to rezone those plus or minus 8.3 acres from CG to RM6 and to simultaneously redesignate plus or minus 8.3 acres located at the southeast corner of Indian River Boulevard and 53rd Street from M1 to CI and to rezone those plus or minus 8.3 acres from RM6 to CG. This is legislative and quasi-judicial in nature. The second public notice item for, again, a public hearing to be conducted on April 15, 2014, is consideration of an ordinance to amend County Code Chapter 308, Indian River County Housing Assistance Program. This will be legislative in nature, and with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and then we'll pick back up with the status report on All Aboard Florida.
Hey, Jackie, how you doing? Oh, yes, yes. Back up.
Hey, how you doing?
Let's see if I can get an app for a train with. Yeah, that would help. Thank you.
Can't let the horse go. Call the meeting back to order, please. No county administrator matters, so we'll move to department matters. Community development, status report on All Aboard Florida passenger rail proposal, memorandum dated March 24, 2014. We also moved up Commissioner Slawry's discussion on this matter, and we'll take them together, and we'll start with Mr. Mattson. Welcome.
Good morning, members of the Board of County Commissioners. Phil Mattson, Indian River County MPO staff, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Let me update you on the status of the All Aboard Florida project and the county and MPO respective responses to the project. To begin with, All Aboard Florida is a subsidiary of Florida East Coast Industries, and they're planning to resume passenger rail service. And their business model, or the details they've released so far, indicate that they're going to be using the FEC corridor. That's the one that bisects the populated sections of the Treasure Coast, right through downtown Vero Beach and through Sebastian and so forth. And they will be utilizing a Federal Rail Administration loan. This, in turn, triggers a process in which they'll have to file an environmental impact statement. And for clarification purposes, I've been in contact with Kim Delaney from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, who's getting very up to speed very quickly on a lot of these processes. The EIS is actually a document issued by the Federal Rail Administration, and it is, in her words, informed by All Aboard Florida. So All Aboard Florida will be doing the technical analysis, supplying it to the Federal Rail Administration, who will be issuing the environmental impact statement. There will be two cracks at the environmental impact statement at the public and county and board level. One will be during the draft environmental impact statement process, and that mandates a 45-day comment and review period. The second opportunity is at the final environmental impact statement process, which has a separate 30-day review. A little bit of detail on the environmental impact statement process and what we plan to do about it. We don't know when exactly the environmental impact statement will be released. There is a statement on record that it will be sometime in late spring. However, the field diagnostics have not occurred yet. And after I've read what's called an environmental assessment, but it's the EIS for the South Florida piece, south of West Palm, a lot of this data is field data. So I'm not exactly sure how an EIS can be issued without them having gone out and done the diagnostics. Kim is of that opinion as well. She thinks the diagnostics have to be completed before the EIS is issued. We're still working as if there were a late spring deadline to the release of this thing and anticipating one. A lot of technical data in it. I think the thing I found most baffling or interesting, ground-borne noise is measured in decibels per micropascal. That's a unit of measure. I thought I'd heard them all. Velocity decibels relative to microinches per second is the vibration impact analysis. A lot of very, very technical and sophisticated analysis in here. And because of that, the county believes that we need to get technical expertise to evaluate the EIS when it's issued. And we have to have a level playing field and really be able to see what these impacts are going to be. So the county is mobilizing to obtain a consultant who's going to take a look at the environmental impact statement upon its issue. The action I'm requesting today does pertain to the environmental impact statement review. The Federal Rail Administration may authorize an additional review period of up to 45 days, and that's their maximum, which would make a total of a 90-day review period if it's felt that it's needed. And we feel it is needed for a couple of reasons. One is the technical sophistication of these documents. The environmental assessment, which is a less robust document, and they had to go that route because there's already trains running in South Florida, is 300 pages long. So I can only imagine how an EIS is going to be covering this whole area. So it's going to be a big, complicated document. We also want to make sure we have a maximum opportunity for the public to be informed of it and aware of it and to comment on it as well. Second issue, another issue we're looking at are quiet zones and crossing improvements. As I said, the diagnostics haven't occurred yet, but quiet zones are an opportunity to mitigate some of this potential downside of the Ola Board proposal by giving us an area where the trains would not be required to blow their horn. In order to qualify for a quiet zone, you have to meet a couple of criteria. One is you have to have an index at a federal level indicating that you qualify for a quiet zone, and that's based on a couple of inputs like traffic, potential for crashes, things like that, turning vehicles, number of trains, all that. The second criteria, there's 6 what they call supplemental safety measures. And if you have any of these in place, you can qualify as a quiet zone. These would include some of the things you've seen in some of the mock-ups before, or we'll see in future presentations. 4-quadrant gates, which would prevent a guy from driving around the gate. Channelization, putting a non-traversable barrier between lanes, again to prevent the guy from driving around. A wayside horn, or putting a horn at the intersection, crossing instead of on the train, etc. So those are the 2 major actions we're keeping our eyes on, the EIS and the quiet zones. In terms of coordination, the MPO has added this as a standing item to all future MPO meetings. There are a number of people that we look to for expertise, such as Kim at the Treasure Coast, and we will be having presentations from these people at future board and BCC and MPO meetings. The Public Works Department is coordinating presently with DOT, FEC, all aboard Florida at the crossings. They're mapping them, taking a look at them in anticipation of the diagnostic process. We've coordinated with the City of Vero Beach's High-Speed Rail Commission, as I was directed to do at the last MPO. In fact, I was their guest speaker at last week's meeting. And it's good to be able to coordinate these things. I think they took the lead on this extended comment period, and that's pretty much to their credit. Finally, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council has been taking this issue up, and I think you'll hear more about that in the commission presentation, so forth. So the action recently taken by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council has been added to my staff report, and basically they voted to request a number of things from the Ola Board proposal or be included in there. I think a few contextual things. One of the things I've learned, I think, by coordinating at these meetings, it's kind of a different ballgame in different counties and different areas. One of the big impacts that was discussed at the recent meeting I went to were maritime impacts and navigational impacts to the marinas and to the boats wanting to depart. There's a fairly low clearance rail bridge now. It takes a while for that bridge to get up and get down, and that's in Stewart and Martin County. If you had much increased volume and stepped up volume of trains at this point, it basically would be eliminating the rights of that maritime group to be able to access the intracoastal and out to the ocean as well. So there are other impacts in other jurisdictions that I think are very interesting and very much relevant to the overall proposal. That pretty much sums up what I wanted to say. The staff recommendation is that you add an additional 45 minutes, pardon me, 45 days.
They like 45 minutes.
If you'd like, I can talk for another 45 minutes. But I won't pose that as a recommendation. So 45-day additional comment period.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Gentlemen, is there any questions of staff? Commissioner Fletcher?
No, I would like to hear further, but I understand Commissioner Solari might have a lengthier presentation as well, having brought back information from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning. Phil, thank you for pointing out the unit of measure that they are utilizing. I don't know how applicable that is. That's usually a unit of measure when they're testing cicadas and crickets and how they resonate their sound. And if that's the case, that's probably what they believe they're hearing is crickets on this. We've been told so much that this is going to take place, that we have no alternative, that it's owned and run and operated, and it's happening. And, you know, I just want to reflect back to, you said you attended a recent meeting. We all, I believe most of us attended a meeting down south. I know I saw Commissioner Zork there when All Aboard Florida was first being touted. And it reminded me of the 750 meeting that we had here, where you were told to look, not touch, and we don't have too much time for questions. We'll get back to you on that. And since then, they had beautiful charts, graphs, pictorials, and since then, Mr. Rusty Roberts has said, I'm here to take questions. I'm here to get some answers to you, and the word answer has not been part of the discussion. We have not gotten any answers from Mr. Rusty Roberts on... Excuse me? You're right. Thank you. I didn't know what that was. But we have not gotten any answers from Mr. Rusty Roberts when he's been present here at the MPO, when he's been present in discussions, come to our office. We've been told that this is going to be a fully funded process. We're not going to ask you for anything. I just want to let it out. We have not gotten an element of information that we're moving forward other than promises and the fact that this was fully funded and that this is a private enterprise. So we need to look real deep because they can't hear crickets any longer. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis, do you have any questions of staff?
No, but, and I don't mean to have my mind made up before a presentation is given, but just looking at this logically, and quite frankly, you know, I remember talking to Ms. Forbes inside Publix and in the produce section, and we were going, you know, it was one of those things to bring myself up to speed, but if you look at it just from a simple standpoint, we are getting the worst of a bad thing coming through our community. That is, there's no benefit whatsoever, other than more traffic on trains. It's not, and I'm not even saying sure stops is a good thing, but I mean, there's nothing for us in this, and so I don't know what all we can do, but I think it's time for us to start trying to figure out where we can be as aggressive as possible, and trying to put a stop to this if we can do it.
Okay, Phil, just two questions. One is on the noise and vibration numbers they gave. Were those just standalone numbers, or were they comparing them to like an existing freight train so we have any kind of reference, or they just said here's the number and nobody knows what it really means?
Yeah, now, I read this EA document. I'm no expert on any of this stuff. What I could infer is it's an ambient level analysis. So this is what the trains would be adding to the existing noise and vibration in South Florida only. Keep in mind, this is relevant only to south of West Palm. We don't have the existing, we don't have a tri-rail system that comes by 3 times an hour and so forth. So we would almost be starting from scratch. It would be starting from the existing level of noise. That's what I could infer. And really, to get to the details of these kinds of questions, I think the best thing is to ask the consultant.
Okay. All right. And then they are applying for a Federal Rail Administration loan.
Yes.
And that's what triggered the environmental impact statement?
Correct.
Is the fact they were applying for the federal loan? Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Zork, any questions? Of staff?
Just two. I think if they didn't apply for the federal secured loan, they would already be potentially open because they wouldn't have to go through the EIS process. The EIS is only an attachment when you apply for that type of rail loan. So it's almost in a good sense that they chose that path because it gives us the opportunity to participate. If they went private funding and just bankrolled the whole process, there would be no EIS for us to even chime in on, I don't think. I don't know if that's completely true or not. The other thing, and I think there are some pieces of missing information. We know it's 32 trains, but is that in the year 2035? What are they opening with? What is the proposed schedule going to be?
Please, folks, we're going to get a chance to comment.
So for me, I'm not going to completely pull the rug out until I know a little bit more of the information of how is the impact done. And I should say I'm clearly not a fan of 750. Never have been. and I think most people know that. I don't lump All Aboard Florida and Tri-Rail in the same bucket as it has been in some other places. But I do want to make sure, it's almost, how do we protect two tracks? How do we, not two tracks that they're going to have here, but if we say we want to be out, that's option A. But if they still have the right to come through, should you pursue option B of how do you secure and partner with the Palm Beach County, I think it's Palm Beach County's Tiger Grant, to have quiet zone funding in place if they are successful in getting through? How do you play both sides of it so you're not behind the 8 ball if they somehow get through the process and they get permission to open and start service? Then we're playing catch-up mode. How do you potentially work both sides so you're not exposed in a negative manner if they're successful in getting open? And there's a window, I think they mentioned at the meeting, April 20-something, that you can potentially add and partner with the current Tiger Grant application that's in progress to pursue that as an option. So if they do get open, if they're not stopped, that you have money to make the improvements that we'd like to have. So I don't know how to balance that. If we just say no and then they open up, then we have no money for quiet zone. So how do we balance that part?
Okay. Commissioner Solari, did you want to add your comments from your matters now, or wait until after public comment?
No, I'll be happy to add them now.
Okay.
I'd like to ask Phil two questions first, if
Absolutely.
I could, and then Adam. Phil, one is, at the March 21st meeting of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, Kim Delaney made a presentation. It was a very good, and in my view, eye-opening presentation, especially when you add the public comment that took place. Is she scheduled to come up before the BCC to make that presentation, and what might that be?
Yes, April 22nd she'll be here, and she will also be doing the same presentation with added information at the next MPO meeting, which is May 14th.
Our MPO meeting.
Correct. So she'll be coming twice, to the BCC on April 22nd.
Okay.
So it's and then the MPO meeting on May 14th.
Great. I think everybody who's at all interested in this issue, and I think that should be most of us in the county, ought to be at one or the other of those meetings or watching on TV. The second question is, you began by mentioning that All Aboard Florida is a subsidiary of FEC Industries. Have you been able to find out anything about the exact corporate form?
No, I haven't.
Okay, because that is an incredibly important thing. Just over the last few, this is happening very fast, and just over the last few days becomes particularly important because we need to be able to trace back who's responsible for what at the end of the day. And if there is a federal loan, and I'm going to use if in front of almost everything I say, because this whole process is extremely fluid, extremely fast moving. There's a lot of things that people are saying, and I don't think any of us have really had much time to vet the information and find out exactly what's what. Why, again, it's so important, I think, for us to pay attention to what's happening. But if All Aboard Florida is a legally insulated subsidiary of FEC, then they can get a $1.5 billion loan. The taxpayers would be on the hook with no corporate equity supporting it, or very little corporate equity supporting it. So we need, at the end of the day, to get financial information. That's one thing I think is crucial, and we need to know who's responsible for that. With that, I'd like to go into the presentation. At the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting that was held on March 21st, the main topic of discussion was the proposed All Aboard Florida project, which, if it goes through, will bring the 32 high-speed trains a day up and down the east coast of Florida from Cocoa to Miami. Some time back, based on a meeting that was held with an AAF representative, I was neutral on the project. I was told that it was to be a private company project on private property with no government support. Many positive aspects of the ventures were discussed. No negative aspects of the venture were mentioned that I recall. Negative aspects of the project have been leaking out over the past months. At the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting, the dam broke. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that the All Aboard Florida project, though perhaps a benefit to the densely populated counties to the south, would bring no benefits but substantial burdens to the communities in Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River counties. The main burdens include, but this is by no means a complete list, the health and safety concerns of high-speed train traveling 110 miles an hour through the counties, including the risks to children around the high-speed rail corridor and the delays that the rail crossings will bring to emergency services. The damage that 32 high-speed trains will do to the fabric of our community as it separates towns and counties into eastern and western segments. The decrease in property values that will come with All Aboard Florida. Though the All Aboard Florida representatives have said that All Aboard Florida was a private company doing a private project, All Aboard Florida is requesting a Railroad Improvement and Investment Fund, RIF loan, through the Federal Railroad Administration. This loan will be guaranteed by the federal government, which means the taxpayers. For me, this is simply another example of corporate welfare where the gains are privatized, but the risks are put on the back of the taxpayers. Evidently, the project is also dependent upon state funding of about $215 million for a new terminal at the Orlando Airport, which will be used by All Aboard Florida. The cost of upgraded railroad crossings in quiet zones may have to be borne by local governments. It is suggested that federal Tiger grants be sought to pay for the quiet zones, but once again, the cost will be borne by the taxpayer, not the private sector company, which will capture all of the financial benefits of the passenger service, if indeed there are any. In addition to the railroad crossings, delays that the 32 daily trains will bring, many council members and members of the public discuss the fact that there are movable bridges over waterways and that boating traffic cannot move when the rail bridges are being used for train crossings. The Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council staff notes that the Code of Federal Regulations places no limit on the number of times the bridges may be closed to accommodate the passage of trains. The expansion of the Panama Canal was also noted. This could easily double the number of daily freight trains. Add in the Amtrak service and the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council is pushing for, and in 5 years we may have more than 70 trains a day, some speeding, some moving more sluggishly through Indian River County, bisecting the downtowns of Sebastian and Vero Beach. These are some of the problems that were discussed in the March 21st Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting. I would also like to note that Chairman Todd Mowry noted that he had 26 cards at the meeting, public speaking cards, people wanting to speak at the meeting. One speaker was neutral, one speaker, a former railroad worker, was for the project. The remaining, including marina operators, public officials such as Martin County Ann Scott, Martin County Commissioner Ann Scott, spoke against All Aboard Florida. Overwhelming comment against going forward. At the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting, Mr. Gonzalez, All Aboard Florida's Executive Vice President for Corporate Development, stated that our studies show the economic benefits of All Aboard Florida. But when asked to share those reports with us, he declined. It has been suggested that the success of All Aboard Florida is based on moving Orlando tourists to Miami gaming casinos. Mr. Gonzalez was asked about Fortress, the parent company of All Aboard Florida and the FEC, and whether it owned gaming interests. Mr. Gonzalez was evasive. Acting Chairman Todd Mowry stated that aspects of Mr. Gonzalez's presentation were disingenuous. He was certainly not forthcoming with the type of information that reasonable people would need to make a rational determination about whether to support the project. It is now clear that All Aboard Florida is seeking public support and significant public support. And it is also clear that All Aboard Florida has not been forthcoming with the type of information that an elected official would need to justify public support for the project. At this point, it seems clear that most of the Treasure Coast region is not All Aboard Florida. It is also clear that the project brings no present benefits but significant burdens and problems to the Treasure Coast. The project promises, with no guarantee, to possibly bring some future benefits, such as a stop or two at some locations along the Treasure Coast, but it is clear that these will not meaningfully mitigate the significant damage that will soon be here when the passenger rail starts. Given this, I would like the Commission to consider at a minimum 3 things today. The first is basically a reiteration of Mr. Madsen's. I was going to request 180 days for the EIS study, but if it's 90 days tops, we'll go with 90 days. But I will ask you to ask, with the support of the Commission, to see if the applicant agrees if that 90 days can be extended to 180 days. It may be that something in there that if All Aboard Florida agrees to the extension, that it could be possible. Make a formal request to FDOT for a copy of any lease that FDOT has made with the FEC or All Aboard Florida for the use of the state right-of-way. Again, this is a significant state asset which is being used by the private company, but with no market, at least market-set compensation for it. And consider a resolution that would go to any donor agencies that All Aboard Florida pay for all costs of All Aboard Florida, including the quiet zones and corridors, and further, that there be no government assistance, be it in the form of loans, infrastructure, or right-of-way, at less than a market rate, which would simply put the risk of the project back on the private sector company and take it off of the back of the taxpayers.
Second.
That's a motion.
Second.
But I suppose before we vote, we ought to hear from the public.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Something tells me I know for the most part what we're fixing to hear, though.
Okay.
And again, I still, this is the motion. This is basically a request for an extension of time for the EIS and for information that we need in order to make a responsible decision. And that's information I believe we haven't gotten. I'm not going to say at this point in time that I'm not going to change my mind. It's just that I was neutral at one point. I've totally been pushed back to the other side based on what I have heard. And I believe that not just us, but that this is an extremely important issue, perhaps the most important issue for our communities on the Treasure Coast than any other that's come before us in the 5 years I've been a commissioner. And I believe that everybody in the community has a right to all the information available that is in any public hands before we make a decision.
I was where you were too. I mean, you know, and for the most part, I try to keep an open mind all the way through the process until I get all the information. But in this instance, we clearly don't. We're not even getting the information.
Exactly.
And so, if they're going to play that game, I'm out.
Okay, that concludes the comments from the commissioners. I don't see anyone that wishes to speak to this, so we'll... Wait a minute. Oh, it is April 1st. Nay.
Good job, Commissioner.
Well, I guess we'll start with Mr. Paladin, since he jumped up. And
I can wait.
I think it'll be busy, so if somebody else wants to get up and be ready at this podium...
All aboard.
We'll flip back and forth and try to move through. Mr. Paladin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bravo. I agree with each and every one of your comments. I'm Joseph Paladin, President of Black Swan Consulting and Entitlement, and also a builder and developer here for the last 15 years. I sat through a presentation by All Aboard up in the town of Malabar, where I have a project I'm bringing through. And it was a lengthy presentation, so some of the comments I'm going to make are based on that presentation that I sat through. Three things I'm going to address in my brief comments. One is level of service, two is impact fees, and three is concurrency. Number one, as far as level of service, you can't bring 32 trains a day through a community and cross our roads through our very busy streets that we already are busy on and not affect the level of service. It has to affect the level of service. Number two, concurrency, which is entirely different than impact fees. It's going to be not easier for us to meet concurrency, unlike cities in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Dade, Broward counties. A lot of your transportation impact fees in those bigger cities are less than they are here, because you can only widen streets so much. They have 10-lane highways down there, 12-lane highways, whatever. After you widen streets so much, then you start paying impact fees towards mass transit, community transportation. So their impact fees are a little bit less because they can pay towards that. Here, that's not going to affect us positively. It's going to be a negative effect because, as you know, we're not going to have any stops here. Now, one of the comments that were made at the presentation in the town of Malabar is that basically they own all the right-of-way, and there was no misunderstanding that they weren't there asking for our permission. They were there to keep us in the loop and tell us how this was going to be done. So it wasn't exactly we had something to say about it. But basically, they didn't address any of those questions. So as far as impact fees, my third thought, it's not going to affect our impact fees positively at all. We're not going to pay less impact fees because they have this rail service coming through here. And one of the comments that the All Aboard presentation made was, Mr. Paladin, when they first put the turnpike in the state of Florida, we didn't have all these stops. We had here and here, and we put the roads in. All these stops came later. That's a good point. So whether or not we want to preserve our way of life here and preserve the way we think it should be here, and we have something to say about I-95 exits here and what have you, keep in mind that once this rails in, you may have very little to say about where the stops come off after a period of time. So we need to weigh all this out. So I see no positive for us, me as a builder, me as a developer, me as a citizen of Indian River County. It's not going to lessen my impact fees. It's not going to help me meet concurrency, and it's certainly not going to improve my level of service on the roads. So I see total negativity here, no positive. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Paladin?
Yes, sir.
You've got projects on the west side of the railroad tracks up on 510 in Wabasso. And you've got a project that you're thinking of doing on the corner of 510 and US 1.
Yes, sir.
Is this project, is all Board Florida, when it comes through town, going to increase or decrease your property values?
I don't see any way it can increase my property values.
Do you see any way it could decrease it?
Yes.
Thank you.
One other question on that, on the concurrency, good point on how can we address in our traffic model the additional breaks in the cycle as you have more crossing events so that it doesn't penalize the local fee payer because of a altered level of service because of something we have no control over?
It's a very good point. And it's got to affect the level of service.
Right. It will somehow.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Every time the tracks
I think in terms of concurrency, that's trip-based, and it's based on the segment itself, but in terms of how it might affect intersections, the Public Works Director might weigh in on that.
Okay.
Yes, Chris Moore, Public Works Director. When we measure whether or not an intersection meets a certain level of service now, we look at the PM peak hour, the afternoon peak hour. We don't know yet exactly how many train crossings or high-speed rail crossings there will be during the afternoon peak hour. We assume if there's 32 per day that some of those are going to land within that PM peak hour. That can be modeled just by increasing traffic flow at particular intersections during that PM peak hour. We know that if there's interruptions in flow due to a train crossing, that traffic will queue up and approach a nearby intersection in a more congested fashion than it does currently. And that can be modeled just by adding 2-3% per approach on the railroad side for an intersection.
So that way it kind of neutralizes and zeroes out the effect so it doesn't change having us build things that we don't need because of an altered level of...
Well, it would probably show as a more congested intersection just by modeling the additional flow due to it being backed up from a train.
Right. Okay.
So we think that we can model that, but we're a little bit at a disadvantage because, again, we don't know exactly how many trains there will be occurring during the PM peak hour, but we assume there'll be 1 or 2 possible.
Right.
And Commissioner Zork, the way that was explained at that presentation that I sat at was they were going to have 16 trains a day leaving out of South Florida and 16 a day leaving out of Orlando. So you're going to have 32 crossings a day somewhere in your community sooner or later.
In addition to the freight.
Exactly.
And I think at some point I'd like to get the answer from them. I've heard from speaking with people at OIA where the end terminal is for the 4 rail systems of Central Florida are going to converge at the airport. They're going to get to 32 at some point. I don't know if it's 15 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out, or whatever it is. I don't know what their day one do they open with 1 train every other hour? What? And we don't have a good answer from.
I don't have that answer.
Right. I think the 32 is the maximum we'll ever get to.
I don't think you can say that either, but I think that 32 is the number they were working with when they made the presentation. Right. And the other thing you need to consider upkeep of these crossings. Cost and upkeep of these crossings, cost of the preparation, cost of maintaining them over a period of time. That's cost that's going to enter into our cost, unless somewhere it's defined otherwise to where we're, not going to be responsible for that. But that's another question that was brought up that we never got the answer to. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Welcome. Name and address, please.
Good morning. Melinda Meikle, 1612 West Camino del Rio. You've already mentioned a few points. I do think that we need to make sure that we have enough time to register the voices of those people who are impacted rather than the Federal Railroad Association administration. There's really no need to rush here because once this project begins, it's going to be expensive and probably impossible to stop. Also, I attended the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and yes, 24 speakers gave very negative opinions regarding this all aboard Florida. However, there's some points I'd like to just bullet point here to be considered. The Federal Rail Administration should not decide our fate, but they do have a predetermined positive viewpoint for all aboard Florida, so that makes our input even more valuable. I would suggest that all aboard Florida should be 100% self-financed, no government funding, no taxpayer burden now and in the future. All aboard Florida should require total transparency for our counties, and Indian River should bear no financial obligation ever. To consider, the Treasure Coast should bear no environmental impact here as well. All aboard Florida's ridership model is based on a small percentage of 50 million tourists in Florida. This leaves 97% of Florida's residents paying taxes for a train that they will never ride. Low ridership is the main failure for railroads in the United States. Supported by Michael Barone's recent article, mass transit usage is not booming, as backers say. Then we go to the parent company of all aboard Florida, Fortress Hedge Fund. I did ask several financial people, and I've heard describe them several times as corporate raiders, which might be really interesting to verify and look into that. The Florida Marine Association will be, as somebody mentioned, totally compromised, and they have had to consequently file a lawsuit. Now, one asks, will the historic counties of Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River be cut in half? Does anyone think that blocking a hospital evacuation route or commuter traffic for 35 minutes an hour or possibly more will not create a negative impact and at the same time destroy business potential? The FRA should evaluate the environmental impact study truthfully regarding the far-reaching and negative impacts to our Treasure Coast. This train is a serious gamble that taxpayers should not be involved with. I also bring to California's Governor Brown, his high-speed rail now is being referred to as the crazy train debacle. Federal monies were cut off in 2011, and the promised $43 billion is no longer available. So I think that he's only secured funding towards the $68 billion in the amount of $3.5 billion. So they're in a real boondoggle out there. He's also being sued by the Sierra Club. So please be part of using common sense to defeat this train if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Menzie?
First, let's speak momentarily positively about Fortress Financial. They own more railroads than the FEC. Their most recent acquisition was the line in Canada that had a major derailment about, I guess, a year and a half ago where they burned half a town down. They're in the railroad business to make money. They own I forget where it is now. I wasn't prepared to look it up, but they own one railroad in this country that's over 500 miles long. We hear talk of diverting the freight traffic to the center of the state. That would be like going to the Ford dealer and him telling you to go buy a Chevrolet. The railroads make money moving freight by the ton mile, not giving it to some other company. As far as getting a station here, I've spoken on this before. I believe very definitely from some conversations I've had that are off the record that if a station is available, there will be some trains scheduled to stop, possibly become a flag stop, and if it becomes financially viable, every train will stop. Yes, there are a lot of negatives, but let us wake up. The world is running out of oil, and our love affair with a car to get from here to there has got to come to an end. And if you go back in a little bit of history, a few years ago, the state of Florida financed Tri-Rail to double track from West Palm Beach to Miami because of the problems on I-95. And with their advanced service down there, they relieved traffic on I-95. We're going to have to wake up and we need to get on the train now before, everything is spoiled because we didn't get on and we wish we did 10 years from now. It's a hard pill to swallow, I know, but it can be done, and it can be done safely. The issue of vibration, I have stood on the main line of Amtrak just south of New Brunswick, New Jersey, watched a freight train go by and thought that I was in a massage chair, and watched the Acela at over 100 miles an hour, which is a high-speed train on the Northeast Corridor, and whoosh, train's gone. No vibration. We need to get all the facts, and we need to see that we decimate the correct facts as to what is going on. And an FRA loan, which you're saying, it makes it into public financing. The FRA does not loan money out where they do not have control, where they can ultimately take over the railroad they loaned the money to. That was created back in the days of Conrail, when the Northeast was dying, and railroads that were dying due to mismanagement and interference from everybody that, shouldn't have been involved in railroads. I am available to talk to any of you about this, privately, publicly, I don't care. I have had an accident running a steam engine, hitting a tractor-trailer load of chickens. It's a very eerie feeling, particularly when you've got 3 coaches of school kids behind you. I mean, it's a two-sided coin. If people want to get killed at grade crossings, they're going to get killed with stupidity. If we want to get from here to there, we need to do it, and we need to, at this point, partner with Amtrak, and whatever we do in this county, we need to do for this county. And we need to do it so that it's compatible with Amtrak trains also, because in time, we're going to have them. The sooner the better, in my opinion, and one facility can handle both. We need to get on the bandwagon and not just throw all the negatives out. Let's get some people out getting the information that I've indicated earlier in a previous meeting, get the station's requirements. I know for a fact that your All Aboard Florida is going to load like a subway train. The platform and the car is going to be the same height. We also know that doubles the loading time of people getting on a train when they can just walk in instead of have to climb up 3 or 4 steps to get in. If they're carrying something, it's so much easier to just step. Let's get on the ball and stop playing, well, we don't want it. Nobody wants a jail in their backyard. Nobody wants a landfill. Yes, we don't have a choice where the railroad is. The Florida East Coast owns that just the way you own the house you live in. Fee simple deed. If they don't have federal money, they can come in here and run all over us. So the smart thing is to try to work with them, to work ahead rather than work backward, and then have them decide, okay, in New York County, you've given us a hard time. You're going to see trains rolling through here at 100 miles an hour, and we don't give a damn. We don't need to create that attitude. We need to create a reverse attitude where they come forward, and help us help themselves and the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mensing. Ms. Fry?
Good morning, Commissioners. Phyllis Fry, 275 Date Palm Road. As we continue to examine the financial debt that will be brought to our community by All Aboard Florida, we must consider their application of the 100% RIF loan. That's a startup loan of $1.5 billion in taxpayer funding from the FRA by FECI, with projected costs of $2.4 billion for construction and capital improvements that will fall on the shoulders of the taxpayers, whereas the current operation of 2 passenger trains in Florida already equals a combined cost to the taxpayer of $153 million in losses, including Tri-Rail at $58 million, with no ridership on either. Perhaps I'm repeating some of the points, but for the record, additional cost-intensive requirements may include payment for quiet zones, crossing gates, fencing, warning lights, raised medians, maintenance, liability insurance, and additional safety measures. Commerce and trade and daily life in Old Town will be interrupted 32 by 32 110-mile-per-hour high-speed train transits plus freight train passages, a total of 50 interruptions per day, With 21,800 vehicles per day attempting to transit 3 downtown crossings, increased pollution at grade crossings will result from lines of vehicles with their engines at idle. Daily costs include the increasing difficulty for police to respond and receive backup for emergency police calls, the hampered ability to access, treat, and transport victims of medical emergencies, slowed and stalled fire and rescue operation. Delays and traffic congestion will affect the following: business commuters, school buses, emergency vehicles, GO-Line buses, commerce and trade schedules, truck merchandising, including transport of food and durable goods, access by tourists and local patrons of Old Downtown, mall shoppers, and access to residential neighborhoods. Private property and business owners close to the railroad tracks will experience the noise and vibrations of a megaton train moving at 110 miles per hour with lateral aerodynamic blast, violating their legal right to quiet enjoyment, while property values, according to real estate agencies, will decline. The growth of recovering commercial, retail, and restaurant establishments will be hampered. I just came from the City Council meeting, and they are making a motion to pass a resolution, and I would ask that our council provide a list of negative impacts and write a resolution, submit to our governor, congressmen, and representatives asking that the funding for AAF be rescinded and that FECI move their passenger train operations to the existing tracks in the middle of the state to avoid the detrimental effects to Vero Beach and all our small coastal towns along the Treasure Coast. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Susan Meal, 131 Laurel Oak Lane. It's interesting because the common thread running throughout all of our discussion today, excuse me, and in the past has been a lack of information from FEC, from AAF, from Fortress, and the list goes on. And this is not by mistake, it's by design, I think. But for the first time at the last Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting, we actually saw the magnitude of what's going to be happening. And to that point, we know we don't have any numbers after all this time from anyone on the total cost to the taxpayer. Just to recap, we're talking about over 350 rail crossings that we are told we, the taxpayer, be it county or state, or federal for that matter, that we will have to pay for upgrading, reconstruction. 3 bridges totally reconstructed, quiet zone permitting. There's a whole issue of sealed corridor requirement that no one really knows the definition for right now. We're looking at having to fence miles and miles of train track. And in fact, at the Planning Council meeting, they even got into a discussion of what type of shrubs best would block the fencing. And we're also talking about rerouting roads in a number of places. All of these costs to be borne by the taxpayer, nobody telling us what it's going to be. But we're supposed to happily go along this road. As we research ridership and freight usage around the state and around the country, we're finding that there are nagging questions that we all have. First and foremost is, why is an intelligent group like Fortress or FEC pushing us to create a passenger train when all of them run at a deficit? We can't figure this out. They're smart people. We now know, we're being told Fortress is a train company. So they would know the numbers, but they're freight trains, I betcha. We're asked, how much are you going to charge for a ticket? Still no amount of money that they know that they're going to charge. We've asked, what's your ridership going to be? They have projected nebulous numbers like 4 million people a year. Now, if we take Acela, which was mentioned earlier, which is the northeast equivalent of a train like this, high speed, I really don't care if Acela shakes the tracks or not. What I do know is that Acela's market is 8 times the size of ours, and we will never get 4 million people riding this train a year. But I'm thinking we're starting to get to the crux of the matter. We also know that it's been published. A railroad expert researched the amount of money it would take, or the amount of ridership it would take to break even. For this train to break even, or even approach breaking even, it would take over 3 million riders a year, paying a full fare of only $70 to go from Miami to Orlando. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think it was 1,800 riders a day, paying full fare, not getting off at the short stops. So we start looking at all of these numbers. No, I'm sorry, it's 8,200 riders per day to even come close to breaking even. So we continue to say, why? Why are they doing this? I'll tell you why. Because FEC is a Class II railroad, and it's using AAF to gain a government-backed RIFF loan, RIF, and use millions of taxpayer dollars for all of the other ancillaries in order to build a second track and state-of-the-art crossings so it can compete with the freight business of CSX, which is a Class I rail line. The other question we kept thinking was, why are they not telling us or promising us in these communities that are being impacted, why aren't they going to give us a train stop? That would shut up half the people that are complaining. Then they could say, well, you're getting a train stop. Why aren't they doing that? I'll tell you why they're not doing that. They're not doing that because they know that their end game here is a freight system on a double track to compete against CSX and to move the freight from Panama and the two ports. They don't want to incur additional costs to build stops in our town because they know in 5 to 10 years, no, not even 10, 5 years, that this will be a non-money-making passenger service that the residents will end up having to pick up the tab on. And yes, it might be only 3 or 4 trains a day carrying 500 people, but we'll be paying the price of those trains while they run many, many more freight cars through this town. And in fact, it was interesting. One of the things they say, the only thing they say consistently is, with the Panama Canal opening up and upgrades to the ports of Miami and Fort Lauderdale, we will be increasing our freight movement up FEC's tracks through the Treasure Coast. The trains will at least double or triple in number, and they'll double in length. That's the end game here, folks. And what it means is that we end up holding the bag on a passenger rail system, and millions of dollars of taxpayers' dollars spent on upgrading a system for a private entity. We should not be doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Morning. Name and address, please.
I am Dan Lamson. I work at the Indian River Neighborhood Association, and my address is 737B Timber Ridge Trail in Vero Beach. I just want to thank you for being proactive about this. As Commissioner Solari said, this is a pretty big deal for the area. It's going to be a huge impact on us. It's going to affect all sorts of people and interests, and we really need to take a very good look at the EIS when it comes out, which is why I'm glad that you are working with the consultant and having that ready. I also, at one of the early meetings when All Aboard Florida was still kind of a good idea, they said, was that when they double track it, the tracks will be able to hold about 300 trains a day. They're not expecting to get anywhere near there, I don't think, at the moment, but that's just something that, there could be trains going up there 24 hours a day practically, and so that's just something we need to consider as the possibilities for increased freight, as some people have mentioned, do continue. But thank you for being proactive, and this is something that a lot of people are concerned about, and hopefully you'll be able to get some answers for us all. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? Okay. Commissioner Solari, if you would be so kind, just to make sure Dylan has this all down, if you could summarize your 3 bullet points on your motion, please.
Again, right now, I'd be happy to summarize them and give them a copy of later. But the 3 motions are, first, to make a formal request to the Federal Railroad Administration that the environmental impact statement be extended to at least the 90 days, but to also inquire as to whether or not, if the applicant agrees to a longer extension up to 180 days, if that is possible. Because I would like us to have the 180 days at the end of the game, if at all possible, and if the applicant agrees, maybe that would be possible. To make a formal request to FDOT of a copy of any lease agreements that FDOT has made with the FEC or All Aboard Florida for the use of any state right-of-way. Also to consider a resolution that would go to any donor agencies, that would be federal, state, local, that All Aboard Florida pay for all the costs of All Aboard Florida, including the quiet zones and corridors, and further that there be no government assistance of any kind in the form of loans, infrastructure, or right-of-way at less than market rates, because that would simply put the risk of the project back on the backs of the taxpayers. And I'd also, if possible, like to add one other thing that, and maybe not in this one, but as a request from the Commission to All Aboard Florida, that they become forthcoming with all the financial information that's available, because a lot of what they say is based on what they say are our studies, FEC studies, but they never give us the information of those studies. And, you know, they may say no, but at least we'll put it in the request. But again, without this financial information, I don't see how any elected official or even any citizen can come to any responsible decision. And I also think that this is going to be an active process. Well, that's the end of the motion. I'll just note that, try to shut up, that this is an active process, and I believe that we'll have more to do in the next weeks, a lot more to do. Yeah. And so
the only thing I would suggest, Commissioner, is your second bullet point, the request for copies of the lease of the state right-of-way. I think there's a, and I forget the exact name, I think there's the Orange County Expressway or somebody closer to the airport that also has given them a lease. Right. And you might want to include that.
I'd be happy to include that. Any and all leases that FEC will be, or Both Florida will be using for the
and I forget the name of it, but
Orange County Expressway Authority, sound about right?
Something about that, Expressway Authority or something. So, and so we'll add that, and then Commissioner Flesher, is your second still good on that? As
repeat the motion once again? No.
Yes.
Okay. And Dylan.
I'm on board.
Dylan.
Just two questions I want to clarify on the second point. So it'll be FDOT and the Orange County Expressway, or its equivalent.
And that will be any government agency that's giving a right-of-way for this project.
Yeah. All right. That's going to be quite extensive amount of public records. I mean, we've got 32 rail crossings just of our own.
There's 350.
They're not giving leases. We're not giving leases for railroad crossings.
Oh, yeah.
This would be for the...
I'm talking about the one...
Oh, not the crossing, but for the track.
Yeah. The right-of-way.
Right, okay.
Really, your search is going to be from Cocoa Beach to the Orlando airport.
I kind of panicked when I was quickly adding up how many counties and 30... Okay, yes.
I think it's the section from Cocoa to Orlando.
It is.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect. One other issue that I would like to raise is, I know in the motion, and I believe it was actually Solari and Davis, is that there was a resolution and that it would go to any donor agency. My only request is that when I draft this resolution and bring it back to the board, if you give me, instead of me putting this together tonight and putting it on the agenda for the next meeting, if you give me some time to try to figure out who those donor agencies are, because I'm going to want to figure out, who applications have been submitted to, and I'd be happy to work diligently on putting that together.
And that could be a process too. I mean, we know we've identified some, which would include the FRA for the RIF loan. We know the governor of the state of Florida and maybe a couple of our legislators who are coming up with the $215 million for the Orlando terminal. We will know better about FDOT when we find the leases that are there. But I think that this will be a sort of ready-made resolution as we uncover more that we can have it ready to go and shoot out.
Dylan, you comfortable with that?
That's fine. I mean, if the board would like me to come forward at the next meeting with a more generic statement about the donor agency, I'd be comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, Alan Plakwich would have had that list by now.
Yeah, he wouldn't have whined about it at all.
Just saying.
They're here 6 months and then they get sloppy.
They start getting sloppy. I tell you. Okay, so we have the motion.
Do you want me to get done by the end of the day for you? I like this competition.
Question of the maker of the motion.
He's not an attorney, but he's fast.
You know, and I don't know if we're getting ready to vote, but just, Mr. Chairman, if I can,
You'll be right after...
the number of individuals that have emailed me on this, and the community concerns, and although, Ruth, by the way, your concerns are going to be incorporated in that. I talked to Joe about it the other day. It's one of those things you can tell this is very, very near and dear, and this is not hype and hysteria. This is something that really, I haven't seen anything like this since the charter debate. That's really about the point this comes up to on this, and so just to let everybody know that all of us are taking this very serious with the input that we're getting from the residents, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know what we can do at this point necessarily, but I can tell you that we're going to do everything we possibly can.
Commissioner Zork, you had a question?
Question of Commissioner Solari as a potential fourth item to consider adding is have the county attorney explore what type of ordinance or resolution we could look at moving forward that would prohibit us from contributing a per passenger subsidy for an all-aboard Florida stop. So in other words, hypothetically, if they do open up and they do decide to come here, it's not like Tri-Rail where you get an assessment per head or per, I think Phyllis had mentioned that it's about $130 million for the counties in Tri-Rail that pay a subsidy to operate them. If they ever open up and they ever choose to stop here, I don't want to be paying them a Tri-Rail type contribution for them to stop here. Some type of prohibition that would keep us from offering that to them. Or maybe that's for something for another day.
Yeah, I think that's probably something for another day. I tend to think that there are going to be a number of other resolutions and votes on this before it's over.
Okay.
But I think that's a fine one to look at. Mm-hmm. But for now, we've probably given Dylan enough work for tomorrow at noon, basically, to wrap up.
And then after we vote on this, I will have a question on the Tiger Grant application discussion, if we could add that to after this vote moves forward.
Okay. So we do have a motion from Commissioner Solari, second from Commissioner Flesher, with the 3 points that have been covered to...
Four. I'm sorry, to the chair. I believe what happened was Commissioner Solari made points 1, which was the 90 or 180 days. 2, it was the formal request for the leases. 3, it was the resolution. And then after some additional discussion, there was a fourth item asked, which was essentially asking All Aboard Florida to be forthright with their financial obligations. And then I recall kind of a re-upping of the motion in the seconds, but that's my recollection of what happened up there.
Financial information rather than obligation.
Financial information.
Okay. Stand good with 4 points to the motion then. All right, gentlemen, let's go ahead and vote on this. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Commissioner Zork, you wanted to bring up the Tiger Grant issue.
Is between this meeting and the next meeting, should we at least know what our options are to have possibly Phil or Stan contact the counties to the south that have an active Tiger Grant application to find out, with the short window that's left, what we might be able to do to have that as a plan B if they are successful, they do get open, that might provide quiet zone funding?
We can do that. It may be helpful if Phil can give you just a little bit of information now. The key with the Tiger Grant is there is a local match requirement. It could be substantial.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, there's really 2 keys on the Tiger Grant. One is it's a $10 million...
Hold on.
Folks, please. We're still in a meeting here.
Oh, thought you were talking to me.
Let that be a lesson.
There's a minimum $10 million grant amount. So I think even if all the quiet zone cost came in as the worst possible scenario, we'd still be well below it as a single county. That's why a partnership was being discussed. There's also a 20% local cash match. Tiger is extraordinarily competitive. It's a 5% approval rate on anything that goes toward Tiger, and we do have a deadline of the 28th. Okay. There is a narrow window. We'll look into it, but those are the facts of it.
Okay.
And the local match is what, 20%?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. For $10 million, that's...
So the only way
now, they've funded very few who've ponied up the smallest possible local match. You can match 50%. The majority of the projects that Brian Freeman and I have explored, because we looked into it a little, are all coming up with overmatches. So.
Okay, so that may not be a
Right, but what we can do is give you some of that type of information certainly by email, maybe be quicker that
Okay,
way,
yeah.
and you can decide if you want to look at it or not, but we think after you get initial information, you might not want to pursue it.
Right.
Is that good with you, Commissioner Zork?
You could also make application, you can always withdraw your application, says we're in the running just in case. That's another option.
Well, that's
something to consider.
You're always in the running, we could make the application, and if we don't like it, we just withdraw our application.
Keeps your options somewhat open, I guess.
Moving on, the next order of business is under Public Works. Work order number 4 with Ecological Associates, Inc. for Sector 3 Beach Restoration Project, Post-Construction and Baseline Biological Monitoring Services. Good morning, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Mora, Public Works Director. I have James Gray, our coastal engineer, here with me. This is work order number 4 for Ecological Associates, Inc. They are the county's coastal engineering consultant and have been for 2 years. As you may recall, in the Sector 3 Beach Restoration Project, a condition of our permitting was to do biological monitoring, sea turtle monitoring, for a period of 3 years after construction. Now, you may remember that Sector 3 was broken down into 3 sections, Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 2B. We are in the process of that 3-year post-construction monitoring currently. In the sea turtle monitoring, they look for nesting frequency of green turtles, loggerhead turtles, and so on. We have to do this type of work. This would actually be year 3 of the Phase 2 project area, year 2 monitoring of the Phase 2B project area, and it also would establish a baseline for the upcoming Sector 3 Hurricane Sandy dune repair project. So there's 3 items in this work order. The total of work order number 4 comes to the amount of $324,920. And we're asking for the board to approve that today.
Okay, gentlemen?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Slaughter. Any discussion on the commission? Public? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Next is Utility Services Sewer Feasibility Study for the Summer Place area.
Move
Determination.
staff recommendation.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher.
I'll second, but I'd like to, for discussion.
Yes.
Okay. Second from Commissioner Slaughter. Actually, is staff here, Vinny? I just thought, there he is. Okay. If you just want to give us a quick summary, please.
Yes. Back in August of 2013, the board authorized us to move ahead with 2 studies. One was for the North County area, the other was for Summer Place. We presented that information to the board on February 18th. At that time, the board directed staff to put the information on the website for others to look at and to hold a town hall meeting, which we did on the 17th of March. After overwhelming input from some of the concerned residents, we wanted to let the board know that at this time, staff did not want to pursue any additional work on the Summer Place project at this time. So this is what we're asking for, the board's approval to no longer continue any additional services at this point.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Nancy Lee Vidra, 9465 Periwinkle Drive. I would like an addendum to this termination to be considered. As you know, we have the most diverse estuary in North America, and to protect it, I would like to make a recommendation that prior to spend any money on sewer, how to put it in, we spend money on identifying where our pollution comes from. I actually funded the Bridge to Bridge, 17th Street Bridge to Barber Bridge, that Dr. Witter from Orca used her Kilroy to determine where our pollution is coming from. So in the future, I think that's a wonderful first step, and I think we should protect our natural resources.
Good. Thank you very much. So we do have a motion and a second.
I want to make one statement about it.
Yes, Commissioner Slaughter.
Evidently at the meeting up in Summer Place, it was extremely heated, and the staff took a lot of heat for coming in and suggesting this which was just a feasibility study, just to get numbers up. So I want to take some responsibility for it. This was started because a resident of Summer Place came to me, mentioned the problem with the lagoon, said that there was support for sewer in Summer Place, and could the county please start the process, which would begin with a feasibility study. So that was the origin of it. And I'll note that based on what staff said, that when they asked how many people of somewhere, Commissioner Fletcher, you were there, 100, 150?
At least 150.
Okay,
yes,
150 residents. When the staff asked, well, how many people support the sewer, this move to sewer, one person, not the person who asked me for the feasibility study, who was in the audience, put up their hand. So I want to thank staff for the work and apologize for putting them in front of that angry audience. But I still think we did the right thing by doing the feasibility study, and we will do what we need for the lagoon. And ma'am, we have the 3 Kilroys now in the 3 relief canals, and we're moving ahead on other projects to identify the source of the pollution, and we will continue to do so.
Commissioner Zort, did you have a comment?
Yeah. It seems a little bit reminiscent of the South Beach sewer discussion from a number of years ago where, and that had a lot of funding support opportunities with it, that then there was opposition for it. But at some point when, and I guess, if we had run and I don't know the right name of this test, but when they put the dye in the septic tank and then they measure it in a water body and they show it migrates from A to B, I don't know if that's the case for sure for Summer Place. I know probably along Indian River Drive and Sebastian, there's probably some real obvious ones that the septic tanks are so close to the river that, and it's a downhill slope, it's likely ending up in the lagoon. But to have that, I call it a dye match test, where you put it in the toilet in the place, you flush it, and then over the period of days you can actually measure and see it come out the other end through the groundwater into the lagoon. So we don't have that type of information for this location, but at some point in the future, when you have, I guess you call that the smoking gun, that you show it's coming from here, ending up over here, and if the people still don't want to do it. Now, my thought was on Summer Place, and as well as the Sebastian one, is that once we have it to a point, shop for grants to reduce the cost. And were the people just against sewer, or were they against paying for sewer? And maybe you could shed a little bit of light on that.
Commissioner Zork, I was at the meeting in attendance, and I have to say again, I would just want to echo what Commissioner Solari said as well. Vincent Burke did an outstanding job in delivering very, very unpopular information. He did not get embracement, but I think at the end of the day, that all changed. I will tell you that I don't want the perception that the citizens, the residents in Summer Place, were vehemently opposed to change. They were not vehemently opposed to a system if it was necessary, if they had the proper data, if there was an identification that they were at the fault. I actually posed that question to the group, and the response from the group dramatically changed. If they knew that they were identified as the cause because they all live at the lagoon, because they appreciate the lagoon and respect the lagoon. And I wanted that noted because I don't want you to think that this is a NIMBY situation, or they're worried about $8,000 to $10,000 out of their pocket to make it a better world. It was all about, there was no empirical data, no study being done that can identify their septic tanks as faulty and in need to be changed. In addition, there were quite a bit of aesthetic concerns for the canopy. There would be tremendous devastation to the trees that existed there, as well as the Shell Road would have to also be adjusted into a different type of road, and there might be even further concerns in the application. Mr. Burke did portray an accurate picture that this would not be a disruptive action as well, that there would be some of their concerns that would be warranted. But I want to again state for the record that the citizens of Summer Place and all in attendance truly cared about the environment. There was a lot of environmentalists in the room, and they might have changed their view if they had that identification. We discussed it, isotopes, stable
Brian
isotopes, or something that had a signature for each tank. That type of survey would have to be done to gain the support of the community.
That's something we have to look at as part of a feasibility. If the concept of the project is to help improve the water quality of the lagoon, we have to put the justification or the proof that goes with that. And I know in the Tampa Bay estuary area, they have, you can go online, they have an array of groundwater monitoring transmission stations where you can actually look and see what's moving through the groundwater in what direction and almost even at what speed. Very costly system, but they have more of the smoking gun proof that, hey, in this groundwater from this area of septics is moving this particular direction, and you actually have the proof. We don't have, they're 2 decades ahead of us of where they're at over there.
You'd think they'd do the same thing for Lake Okeechobee. Oh, that's a whole different.
Right. All right, thank you.
So we have a motion to terminate from Commissioner Fleischer, second from Commissioner Solari. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. There's no county attorney matters under commissioner items.
Move approval.
We have a motion from Commissioner Solari, second from Commissioner Davis. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. Commissioner Solari, you have one remaining item, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council response to commission request to put 750 name change on their agenda. Commissioner Solari.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Indian River County, through resolution number 2014-003, asked that an item be placed on the March 21st meeting of the agenda of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. The resolution was a request from Indian River County that the 750 bureaucracy change the name of the resource document and any future documents to accurately reflect the number of counties still participating in the process. The item was not on the March 21st agenda of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. At the beginning of the meeting, they asked why. I was told that the matter went to the Executive Committee of 750 instead. I will note that Chairman O'Brien is a co-chairman of 750 Executive Committee, and he is also a chairman of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I am unaware of any notice to the county that the item was not going to be placed on the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council agenda, and I know that I, as a member of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, did not receive any such notice. One is left with the impression that this was handled in a way to avoid any meaningful discussion of the item at the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and simply to sweep the matter under the rug. I'm happy, however, to report that after some discussion, I was able to get a commitment to have the item placed on the April agenda of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Hopefully, it will be placed near the top of the agenda and not on the bottom that our last request was, so that we can have the discussion prior to council members departing for the day. And that's the report.
Thank you, Commissioner Solari. Emergency Services District authorization for final payment and release of retainage to Barth Construction for the construction of the RSD building.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Solari, second from Commissioner Fleischer. Any discussion?
Did that young woman want to speak on it?
That young woman. That beautiful woman. That's why. She was beautiful.
Maybe Jackie can filibuster until Wesley gets back. I don't know. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion does pass by a 4-0 vote. Commissioner Davis not in the room at the time. And that is it. Gentlemen, any further business to conduct? You're good? Okay. Seeing none, everybody have a happy April Fool's Day, and we stand adjourned.
What?